right, welcome everybody. We're now starting our, lower the volume on that. We are now starting our third budget hearing subcommittee. I'm going to take the roll. Councilor Naomi Sabbath. Councilor Judith Garcia.
Present.
Councilor Todd Taylor is present. Councilor Giovanni Recupero, present. Councilor Leo Robinson, present. Councilor Calvin Brown. Okay. Councilor Damala Vidal. Councilor Melinda Maldonado. Councilor Yamir Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilor Roy Avellaneda is here. Councilor Enio Lopez has joined us. All right, so we have 7 here, 4 absent. So, looking at our schedule for tonight's budget hearing, our first department that we will be reviewing is the law department. Sitting here with us is City Solicitor Cheryl Watson. So if she would like to, I don't know if the city manager has anything to start, but I'll recognize her and we'll go along. And for those of you at home, we've printed out page here.
Page 11.
Yeah, so the page on the main document, it is 11. On the annotated, it's 4 and 5. And on the employee salary list, page 7. So again, page 11, 4, 5, and 7.
So, Mr. President, I would just say that the non-department budget is on its operations side, level funded from last year. On the salary side, you'll see it's down significantly by 60,000, and that is because we have not replaced one of Cheryl's assistants who left in the spring to take a different job. We are going to try to get by this department with one less person in FY21. It's not optimal, but given our fiscal constraints, we made the decision not to fill this position for a year. It is a position that we will need to fill, but we're going to try to get through FY21 with one less attorney in this office. And so that's the budget as submitted.
So would you like to say anything?
I'm just gonna agree with the city manager. We're gonna try to do both the city and the schools with one less attorney.
Okay, Ed, if you want to go around any changes by line? And,
Yes, well, there's no changes in the operations section at all. Most largest item here is the legal services, and that funds receivership cases, any action taken there, arbitrations, labor negotiations, things of that sort. We also have in this budget the access to online research that comes out of those subscriptions and municipal ordinances that are updated on a professional plan. There are no changes other than salary options. So overall, the budget is down.
Councilor Robinson, any questions?
My only question, the amount of money for outside attorneys. Do you have enough money in your budget that's sufficient?
So that's always interesting as to what happens throughout the fiscal year. As you know, we recently came for the supplemental. 75,000 is about average of what we spend on our day-to-day matters. I can't guess. I'm hoping there's not a lot of bankruptcy matters and receiverships in the future. And I believe we could probably make it through FY21. They may help out a little bit more since I'm down an attorney, but we'll try to balance it the best we can.
If I could just make one more comment on the salaries, the school department funds a portion of salaries to support the law department. supervisor account. So they're funding about $78,000 worth of salary out of their budget.
That's correct.
Council Taylor.
So you basically eliminated one salary from the budget, and that was going to be a new lawyer coming in, right?
Yes, the new assistant city solicitor, that's correct.
And what's happening with that particular, is that still going to go forward in year after?
My intent would be to hire that. Yes, I don't think long-term we can go with 2 attorneys up there, but, which, in a lot of places, we're trying to struggle through FY 20. So this is gonna be one.
Are there any counselors at home that have any questions for the law department? Seeing none. So Tom, explain to me a little bit. I have some questions there, just about a statement, I guess, about the administration here. The individual that is now, or rather, the position that is now vacant, what did that position, what were the responsibilities of that position? And how does it change from last year to this year?
So both assistants tend to do the same level of work, but that position did more of the litigation, more of the running to court. The other one tends to do a lot of the municipal hearing stuff and school stuff. They shared the school investigations. We're lucky school has been out for a few months and may not be on campus as much. But they do a lot of the litigation, which was helpful to have in investigations, in-house, defending city employees.
Is any of that resource using on the school, with the school issue, is that ever paid for out of the school budget?
So the school has a budget, a separate budget for their outside legal fees for labor. So a lot of their labor is done with outside counsel. If there's a conflict between the superintendent and the school committee, outside counsel would take one side. I tend to do the department, the superintendent, and outside counsel would represent the school committee on serious issues. But they probably have a budget for about 60 to 65 for outside counsel in their line item for legal services.
But if your office is handling some of the school issues, is it enough to say that they can't pay a quarter of time of somebody of that in that capacity, since sometimes your department is being used for that, or? So I see that cross paying in other departments where they're, the department of, since they're doing legal work for the department, why are they paying some of the load for your office?
So they do. A lot of my salary, the staff salary is shared. So when you look at this, we just said that it's about $78,000 goes towards our salary. They also pay some of our legal research. It's not all paid through this. They also have a training line for us because school law is a little different. So most of the assistants don't know school law, so I send them the training. So they do pay. If there's specialized training, I'm the civil rights officer for the schools. So if I need a training, they pay for that. They send me to a conference. So they do pay for some of the services.
Yeah, so if you look at the salary document on page 7, you'll see the breakdown. The school is picking up over $77,000 of the total salary in this account. So the total salary for the city solicitor is $339. We're only appropriating $267. $268 with longevity.
Since 2008, Counselor, they have been providing some funds since I became transitional school counsel since 2008 to our salary. My staff does the school records request, so there's a support staff involved also.
It's average about a third of the position. a third of its efficiency. The operations lines do not show on general fund, show as being baseball. Those are in their own budget. We don't see here. They do pay some operation costs.
So, Tom, I've seen several budgets over the years, and I remember when things were lean, kind of like where we are right now. I've seen the city manager's office literally down to just two individuals, city manager and then the secretary. Where I think we are facing some lean times, and I have to wonder that if we're talking about not hiring an attorney who is doing some work, you know, and in your mind, how do you defend or explain saying, I think you have a higher number of individuals working in your office that may or may not be, let's say it's luxury at this time, when we're not filling a position of, say, maybe an attorney or elsewhere. So again, I'm just asking for a little bit of the explanation in your thinking there, because I have to wonder that some of the tasks that your office are handling, maybe during these times, aren't considered a priority and more of a luxury item.
So I'd say that I'd have to lay someone off in my office. And that is what I've tried to do, is present a budget that did not include any layoffs. Layoffs are bad for morale, and layoffs don't save a huge amount of money because we're self-insured, so we're gonna pay all the unemployment costs of the person laid off. This was a situation where I didn't have to lay anyone off. I had an opening. If there were an opening in my office right now, I would not be filling. But that's different than laying someone off who's currently working. If Liz Casey, who left, did not leave, I wouldn't be reducing this. This was an opportunity. I had an opening. We were about to fill it just as COVID hit. So the question was, in the midst of this, when I'm going to unions and saying, you've got to give me concessions, I want to avoid layoffs, I felt they just couldn't justify bringing another high-paying position into the city. It would have been the same thing in my office. If, God forbid, Ned were to leave, I would probably say I'll struggle and get by without a deputy for a year, because I couldn't justify bringing another person at that salary in. But I wouldn't be suggesting, let's lay someone off. So that really is the distinction.
Todd, I don't know, any questions? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I understand your point, and it's certainly valid. I just, you know, I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the person for that position had already been hired. And so, while that's not technically a layoff, I mean, promises were made and then kind of come back on. So I just, you know, you had said earlier about I think it was the SEIU people, they were promised something, so you felt like you had to do it. And we agreed with that. And that was fair. Now, look, I understand. I'm just, you know, it's
a tough. I'm not suggesting it isn't a tough decision, but we were ready. We had made a job offer. There was a start date, but the person was not an employee, and we got hit with something completely unexpected.
no, obviously. How much does not having that person, how much is that impeding the work going on? Or is the work, you know, just collapsed because of COVID?
It has not collapsed.
That's what.
So you have to understand, COVID was a different situation. People weren't on campus where I had allegations left and right happening, right? So that slowed down. work shifted from my office for the COVID-related information. We're doing some licensing stuff. I still have a full-time employee. I still have, a full-time attorney. So we'll get through. I mean, when I started here many moons ago, I was alone. I may not have been doing the school, but I was alone, and slowly but surely my office had grown.
Yeah, I will say this, look, I'm willing to explore, if 6 months from now, it's clear the office is struggling, I'll come back to the council.
So that's basically my question, is
But
how much are we being impacted by this, by not hiring the position, or freezing the position? And because obviously, if you didn't need an additional person, you wouldn't have hired them in the first place. So that's my question about how much is being impacted, and are you going to be just completely in the weeds now?
Well, right now, we're lucky, courts are closed, enforcement on certain habitability is slowed. So, I mean, I don't think we're gonna feel it, Steph and I, until at least 6 months from now, when life gets back.
I mean, it could be that 6 months from now, I come to the council and say, look, I feel like the department's really struggling. All the courts are open now, the school's back in session, got the same level of work in the law department that we have in normal circumstances. But it was hard to justify bringing on a lawyer at a time when City Hall was shut down entirely and the courts were closed.
I understand. I just wanted to hear.
Yeah, I mean, this
what the
is.
situation was and why it went down that way. That's all. And what's more importantly, what's the prospect for the future, and are we going to need to bring back that person? That's.
We will absolutely need this position. The question is, when is it going to be filled? Is it, November? Is it February? Is it we survive the whole FY21? I don't know,
Right.
I have to come back to you with money for a chief of assessing.
Right.
Probably, at the end of the calendar year. I may at the same time go back and say, let's bring on the assistant city solicitor. But at least in both cases, we will have saved half a year's worth of salary.
I understand where the city manager is coming from, and this is a conversation that the city council in itself has to have. We're talking about, there's something to be said about a budget that is approved now, and with everyone that is in place and hired at this point. And you can, as he said, maybe in 6 months from now, you add a position, but it's quite the opposite of saying we're keeping them on the books now. And because if you're on the books now, you probably, who knows if later on you're going to fire the person versus making the changes. And yes, can firing be that overwhelming? I get it, but I'm also getting more of what is going on in the real world. When I say real world, I mean private sector. And I'm an example. It wasn't great that I had to lay off all my employees, because of what's going on. Is it good for morale? No, but those are the realities. And sometimes one of the things that's frustrating for me, and I'll say this continually, is whatever we're going to agree to here today or in next month is what our taxpayers are going to end up having to come to terms in October. And and the looming, I haven't heard anything different, that the looming is going to be a 2.5 raise no matter what. Yet we have a lot of people out there who are suffering, have laid off, and then morale's not great. So where's the buffer there? It just seems that I think, it's hit the fan. And it is what it is. I know it sucks for morale, but I don't know if we're seeing the cuts that we need to see as drastic as they need to be. Maybe, I don't know. I've been here, and Leo, you've been here to 2 recessions. I've seen what a budget looks like when it's pared down. This is not it. And when we have to go back and tell the homeowners and the business owners that we have to pay for it, that's the challenge. And I want to make sure, because again, we've seen pared down budgets. And it doesn't seem like this is the reality that I'm looking for yet.
So I just want to say that I did negotiate with the union to avoid, for the purpose of avoiding layoff. We have unions that have renegotiated their contract for FY '21. The steelworkers, the SEIU, library, they all agreed that they would defer their raise for FY '21 in return for a commitment in FY '21 alone for no layoff. That seemed like a good deal, and that's reflected in this budget. Those employees are taking a 0% raise. All the exempt employees have gotten a 0% raise, not just for FY '21, but FY '20 as well. So employees, I'm not suggesting that they still, layoffs would be more impactful in terms of you'd save a little more money. They're not huge amounts because we're self-insured for unemployment insurance. So it doesn't save you huge amounts of money to lay people off. If you can gain, my position has always been, if I can gain concessions in lieu of layoffs, I'd rather do that. And in all these groups, even the exempt employees have taken a 0 and 20, the only group that took a 0 and 20 and a 0 and 21 to try to avoid layoffs.
I think too, your point's well taken about the self-insuring, economic aspect of this, but, it seems to me that a little credit should go to past councils in building up the rainy day, funds. And if there was ever a rainy day, it's now. And if there's ever a purpose to use money like that, I think it's now. So while I know firsthand about having to, unfortunately lay off people in my company, and I would not wish that on anyone else. And so I'm happy that there's no layoffs in the city or at the school. So that's something, and I think past councils deserve some credit for building up those funds for now. And I think that's the way we ought to operate in the future, trying to rebuild those funds so that we have, something to fall back on in an emergency, because God knows whatever's going to happen.
Okay. Any other counselors at home have any questions on the law department? Nope.
Yeah, I got a question.
Counselor Recupero.
In your department, right, Ms. Cheryl,
Yes.
you have, how many people working for you?
In the law department, there's 4 of us. And then I have a licensing administrator, which is a separate budget, licensing.
So between them all, right, what is the average salary?
Well, so you can't average it because there's 2 attorneys and 2 clericals, and the salary ranges are different. But
Let's say the lowest one in your department earns what, 50 grand?
yeah, she's about 54 probably, around that.
So we couldn't save anything in your department.
Well, what you saved is both my clericals did not receive a cost of living for FY '20, nor will they receive a cost of living for FY '21. That's about, what, 5% on there.
What union is your department under?
I'm not in a union, I'm exempt.
Oh.
My staff is confidential.
So that means Mr. Ambrosino can't negotiate with your department like he can with the other ones, because the other ones, they get a raise.
Well, I try.
Oh, yeah.
It means that I determine whether they get raises or not. And we've determined that.
So that's up to you. You're the ultimate say.
Correct.
My staff appreciates not being laid off.
But let's say things got really, really bad, right, Mr. Tom?
Yes.
Which we hope they don't get really bad, right? If you were to lay off people like you were talking, right? Would you lay off the people with the lowest salary or the people with the highest salary?
So I could not lay off anyone in SEIU, steelworkers, or the library, because I've negotiated contractual agreements with them not to lay them off. I'd only have other positions outside of those three unions to look to if things got really bad. But this budget is based on what I think are fairly conservative revenue assumptions. I mean, I'm assuming a 30% cut in unrestricted general local aid. It may not be that bad, but I've assumed it for purposes of setting this budget.
So you hoping that everything will get back to normal?
Not back to normal, but it's possible that some of the reductions I've built into this may not be as bad as I'm projecting.
Well, so I understand what you're saying now. You're saying that it wouldn't be as bad as we make it out, you know.
It's hard to know. It's impossible to say because I think so much is depending upon what Congress does with the next relief package. If Congress grants relief to state and local governments, some of the cuts that I built into this budget may not transpire. If Congress does not, then, you know, you might see a 30% reduction in unrestricted general local.
So this year you won't, but for fiscal year 22, you might have to.
I'm not even, at this point, I'm focusing on FY 21. My contractual arrangements with all the unions for no layoff is only for FY 21, and we'll figure out FY 22 at the appropriate time.
Because I hear from a lot of employees, they worry about being laid off. It's all, they're telling me, you know, they're asking me about that.
Budget questions.
Huh?
Budget questions. I need a budget question. Okay.
I have no more questions.
All right. Seeing no other questions? Are we moving on to judgments? Or is that all?
Yeah, judgments, that's on page 54, the main document, and the annotated document is page 25. This is a project where we recommend funding of $50,000. This is a line that the statutes allow us to go into deficit for if necessary. This is line is the line we use to settlements through or for settlements. We fund this at $50,000 every year. If there's a need to ask for additional money, we come back to council for that. If we're getting water in days for some of that in fiscal 20, so we feel comfortable with $50,000.
So, based on the description of this line item, this can only be used for.
So if there is a judgment against the city in money damages, to settle claims and to settle lawsuits. As opposed to a judgment, you're doing a settlement.
Okay, so for example, what are some claims you had an actual of, let's say in 2018, $46,000. What is some actual claims that were paid out, for example?
So, and for this past year, for example, we've had pending lawsuits, discrimination lawsuits. Our deductible comes out of that. We pay about $50,000 in the deductible for legal fees and whatever if we lose. Sometimes those are settled. I don't have a say in that. We've paid, so most of this is for Triton. We had an employment matter that we paid attorney fees on, a bad tow. If we settle certain claims, that's what we pay out of this. So we've had a couple of those this year.
But is this different in addition to also legal services or no?
No.
But
So these are insurance covered legal services when I say that. So under when the insurance, we get a claim. Police car hits another car, we get a claim. If it goes to suit and there's an assigned attorney, the insurance bills us back. As part of our deductible, they pay the legal services. So we may have lost the case, we may not have lost the case, but we paid our legal services.
okay.
I just have a question about, are we self-insured for everything?
No.
Okay, so what are we actually paying insurance companies for?
General liability insurance.
Okay.
We have property insurance for our buildings. We have insurance for all of our vehicles. We have insurance for.
Professional liability.
Professional liability for claims, discrimination.
Right, okay.
A lot of those
So
arise
pretty
out
much,
of school.
so pretty much everything except workman's comp.
And health insurance.
And health,
And group health insurance. Those are three
Right,
major
so health-
things for which we're
Okay,
self-insured.
thank you. That-
Workers' comp, unemployment, group health insurance. For most other things, we have insurance, but in the insurance realm, we have, you know, high deductibles on some of
Yeah,
these
of
things.
course.
So in the employment discrimination insurance, I believe our deductible is $50,000. So
Yeah, it's high.
if there's a $200,000 claim against us and we settle for 100, we're on the hook for 50.
Right.
It's just that insurance is very expensive. Those claims arise a lot, particularly in the school context. So you know, we could have a low deductible, but the insurance cost would be much higher, obviously.
Right, and chances are you're gonna burn through the deductible anyway, so it doesn't take too many.
It doesn't take too long.
So I understand, and it makes perfect sense.
So the difference from this account is, what I was saying, the legal service account, we're paying the bills of lawyers we're hiring for. Mostly it's for,
Arbitrations.
for legal arbitration cases, particularly with the public safety unions, and for when we're,
Receivership
receivership.
with tenants,
Yes.
bank, you know, what I mean, certain things, tax title
For
stuff,
the most
stuff like
part,
that.
this account is paying either the deductible on a claim that we've settled through our insurer, or we're settling a case on our own.
It's cheaper to just get rid of it.
Someone's,
Yeah.
there's a broken city
Yeah.
pipe, someone's basement got flooded, they make a claim against the city, we decide to
Trust me,
settle.
that happened in my district.
Yeah, it did happen.
We decide to settle.
I'm well aware of that one.
Any other questions on judgments? Anyone at home? No? Okay. Licensing, well, 165 is page 19 in the main.
Yes, it's 6 Yeah, I have a licensing hearing at 6, so I gotta get Mike in. I need him.
Page 19 on the document, page 8 on the annotated document, and page 12 in the salary document. Page 19, page 8, page 12.
Okay. Okay.
This budget is very straightforward. There is one individual who staffs this department. If you look at the salary, longevity, and under-60 bonus lines, those are new. The reason for that is the person who has come in this year is new to this department, has seniority. So the longevity is funded here that wasn't before because the person who funded before didn't qualify for it. That's the main reason for those two new lines. The advertising is the largest line item in operations, and this is the licensing board public hearing advertising. So this is a very straightforward budget.
So the rise in the salary is because the person who took the job was higher ranking?
That's one reason, but the other is what we talked about on the first night. Is
Yeah, about the
the steps that might be present and the appropriation in 20 did not include a 20 increase.
Well, it's just, I mean, I know 20% is a lot, so I mean, I'm thinking, one extra week and a step, but just curious, what was the
Well, I
budget?
think the person that is in there now is at a higher step. So
A couple of steps higher, because she's been a long-term Chelsea employee.
So the person that preceded her was at a much lower
Is on the first step.
level on the step range.
So how does that work? So let's say, a position is a change in that direction. And this is, of course, more of a labor issue than if you have, say, that sort of step. At what point don't you think that basically you're overpaying a person because they had a higher certification, even though they're doing the same job? Because if we have a step, I don't know, a 6, doing the job and paying 45, and all of a sudden it's vacated, and you get a step 9 to take the same job, even though the job was different, but you have to pay them more, or,
So what you don't understand is that if they take a step down, they have to take that grade level. So it's a grade down. So if you're saying someone's at a grade 9 and takes a grade 6, they're gonna lose pay.
Yeah,
But, yeah.
we're not paying them the same.
Yeah.
Just because they were in a different job.
Yes.
The pay depends upon the job classification. We may have reclassified, I'd have to go
So this
back.
job-
It might have been reclassified.
Yes.
By the union during the course of FY20, because they thought it was a job that demanded more, and we didn't have it graded high enough in their schedule.
And I agree, because when I first hired someone, it was brand new to me to have a licensing administrator and me not doing it. And so, what you don't see when you're at the licensing commissions is the day-to-day consumer affairs with these people applying without attorneys, going to these locations, enforcement. So I think that the pay,
So this
Yeah,
job
pursuant
could
to-
have been reclassed. I'm trying to, Ted, do you remember? It was
No, I
not
think-
a grade 7?
It's a grade 7, and last year, it was occupied by someone at a grade 7 step 1.
yeah, and she's, and then
Grade seven,
Naomi's
step
a,
one.
Within the same grade.
yeah, it might be the same grade. She just came in at a higher grade because when you do move up, you get to negotiate your step level and you get to, depending on where you were at your other position. So we try to give you the same salary
Yeah, so
that you
we-
already
She
had.
probably came in and she was
Yeah.
at the same grade, and we tried to ensure that she didn't suffer at the same grade.
A loss to work harder.
Yeah, she has to be qualified to do the job, and then the union contracts have provisions that if they're at a certain level, they're entitled to a percentage of increase when they go to the job, provided that they qualify.
okay. Any questions, anyone? No? Okay. And that,
That's
all right,
The wrap,
when you're taking a wrap,
sharing it with McAteer, that I need at 6 o'clock,
There you go. Thank you for coming.
meeting.
down in the basement.
so we got Mike, and we gotta do him quick, even though it's gonna, hopefully. So, for those at home, in the main book, it's page 28. In the annotated, manager's budget, it's page 12. And in the employee listing, it is page 20.
What's that last page, Counselor?
20,
20,
20.
12, and 20, thank you.
Yep. Okay, welcome, Mike.
All right, how are you?
Ed, you want to begin?
So the salary section has an increase of $85,900. There are two main reasons for that. The first is that a person who was previously funded in a temporary line as a part-time building inspector has been moved to the regular salary line. So 27,000 of that is attributed to that particular position that's moved in to this line. The second is that there is a code enforcement supervisor position that was added contractually, and so that accounts for some of the increase here as well. And then there's the 53rd week and the others that we talked about previously. You'll notice the temporary salary line is down 19,000. That's because of what we just talked about moving into the other line. The car allowance is up 3,300. There was a contractual increase in the latest CPA that added monies to that particular benefit. And so there reflects the 11 inspectors at the higher number. The printing cost is down 2,500. We were able to cut where we could in this budget, and that's based upon the level of expense that we have seen. You look back to the previous 3 years that are shown for actual 17 to 19, and it's roughly around 2,000 to 2,500 mark. So we're comfortable with cutting that down to 2,500. Overall, this budget is up 6%.
607. I have 7.26. Group total,
Six point four five is the overall.
Is the overall.
Page
Okay.
29.
On the next page.
Salaries, the overall budget is 6.45.
Tom, any,
No, we had, in the budget we presented in FY 20, we had notified that we had included in there a position for part-time building inspector, and we ended up hiring that person in the fall. That's Halil Demir. And so that is one of the changes in salary. So there's one additional employee, this part-time building inspector. That hiring happened in the fall. And then, as Ed said, we had negotiated with this union the creation of a code and a building inspector supervisor that was taking effect on July 1, 2019. And so that wasn't reflected in the budget last year, but it is reflected in this budget.
councilors, any questions regarding the inspectional services budget?
Yeah, I just have one question, Mr. President, regarding the car allowance. How many cars is that including?
Well, those are take-home cars, Council, that's a benefit that the inspectors receive, each of them monthly, for the use of their own cars. There are
Okay. Okay. So they use their own car and they get reimbursed for mileage or within the city or outside the city?
No, not reimbursed for mileage, it's a stipend that they receive contractually from the CBA, which is called car allowance. It's not mileage reimbursement.
So per car, what's the stipend?
Can't hear.
The allowance they receive per year is 4,800.
Okay, thank you.
Each inspector receives 4,800 a year, that's broken into 12 payments and paid monthly.
Yeah, I apologize for the volume because I can't hear you folks. I have to turn mine up a little louder, so I'm getting used to this. 2 days old, sorry, I'll turn it off.
Turn it down.
I have a question.
No, last time, Ed was there, so he's farther away from the mic.
Yeah, you have trouble hearing me, Counselor?
No, he muted himself.
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Cooper.
You have trouble hearing me?
Mr. McAfee, what is a temporary salary? Is that someone that you hire part-time? What is that?
Yes, so I have a plumbing inspector and an electrical inspector. If they leave for an extended amount of time, sickness or vacation, more than a week, I need somebody to come in and do electrical and plumbing inspections.
So is that applying to everyone in your department?
No, just those two positions. Anyone else, we have backup people in the department, but legally only a plumbing inspector and an electrical inspector can do that work. So I have somebody already, we have an agreement with two other individuals. If my electrical inspector goes away for 2 weeks, I'll have the inspector from another town come in for like 2 or 3 days, spread out, so that he can do his minimum inspections.
So this is not the other inspectors?
No, nobody else in the office. No.
Okay.
One guy is a contractor, and he'll come in and help me. And the other guy was the inspector in Saugus. I don't believe he's there anymore, and he'll come in and help me. Just do inspections. He won't do plan review. He won't, just a bare minimum to get us by while the person's out on sick or on vacation.
Thank you.
Doesn't happen too often.
Councilor Lopez.
On the overtime, how are this overtime is
So there's two.
scheduled?
So there's two types of overtime. There's Saturday morning overtime. Most Saturdays of the year, two inspectors will come in. It's a revolving schedule. They'll come in and they'll check for illegal work going on over the weekend. They'll check for trash. They'll check for issues like that. We issued $270,000 worth of tickets last calendar year. The other overtime is for when there's a fire in the middle of the night, when there's a car crashes into a building, when we get a complaint about a restaurant, it's Saturday morning, an emergency after hours. Those are two different types of overtime.
And usually the same people come every Saturday or?
We have a revolving shift. No, we have a revolving shift.
Yes.
You're welcome.
So basically, if we want to call you, council wants to call you a complaint, it's better to call you Monday through Friday, so it doesn't cost us
It doesn't cost us any money to do that, yes. There's an emergency over the weekend, I might have to send someone.
anything. Todd,
So just two things real quick on what's professional and technical?
Professional and technical. That was the money for the computers. So we have a new software database, we had one before. And I believe that's what it is. It's money. We have a contract with.
Software consulting.
Exactly.
Okay.
If there's some needs, it's not covered under the
I
contract.
figured it was something like that, but I wanted to know. And then, for this,
Yes, right now, yes.
It's permitting software, it's the, consulting for the permitting.
yeah, okay.
Program thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. And the other thing was, 4,500 for conference travel. Is that, I mean, is that gonna get used this year, or is it gonna be Zoom conferences?
It's cut down. So the building inspectors, we have seminars every month, and we gotta keep continuing education.
No, I get it.
So it's canceled all through December, so we won't be going on any meetings till December at least.
So, okay, very good.
Luckily, it's the last, we have a 3-year cycle, it's the last year. Most of my, I'm short 2.5.
So the
grand.
chances of using all that money is, yeah,
Probably not gonna.
yeah,
I
okay,
don't
very
know.
good. Thank you.
I got one more question for you, but just,
I have another question.
can I ask him a question for?
Councilor Recupero and then Councilor Brown.
On this one here, right? I don't get, do we get reimbursed when you demo and board out a building?
Yes, you get, that money gets back to you.
So, go ahead.
You can answer it.
So in this line, we fund $25,000, and that is for emergency housing expense, and board up costs and so forth. There's a foreclosure revolving fund that we have, where we receive fee income from, and use that to board out where we can.
So,
It doesn't come back on my line, I think,
so the money goes back, right? So the money goes
to the city, but not to my,
the insurance company's paid, right?
or the new owner, or the old owner, or the bank, or we take the property.
Okay.
But that money does not go into this line. This is
It
the
goes to the general fund.
general fund expense line.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mike, thanks again for being here tonight. Can you update us on the inspections? A few years ago, we had this undertake initiative regarding going around inspecting the units and housing. Can you tell us about what are you finding with illegal room in houses or basements, or what you're not finding?
So last calendar year, we issued 1,600 certificates saying that the property is safe and healthy. We actually had to do 2,500 inspections to do that, so there's a lot of re-inspections. We find basement apartments, we find, in the daytime, you don't really see the overcrowding, but you do see the locks on the doors, you do see the extension cords, you do see the hot plates. We find these problems, and so I wouldn't say it's an epidemic amount, but we find them. Maybe eight a month, maybe a little less, I would say.
So you find 8 a month, is there some certificate you give that to the landlord or to whoever the owner is, that within 30 days you come back and what do you find? Do you find the situation the same?
Yeah, sometimes it takes long. A basement apartment could take 6 months. But other things that are quicker to fix, like the illegal rooming conditions with the locks on the doors, things like that. Yeah, within 30 days they're fixed.
And last question, how much revenue did you bring in for fees for, like, folks want to come in and they want to get inspection licenses for plumbing or so on? Which I am trying to figure that out here.
So I don't know which permits. So I think it's probably permits, everything, probably $2.5 million. I know building permits is 1.6 million we brought in last calendar year. Which permit fees you're looking for?
When people come in, they want to do plumbing. A lot of folks that, well, not a lot, but when you hear people talk about, I applied for the license, they didn't give me the license, so I just started the plumbing in my basement and it becomes a illegal rooming house.
I'm sorry, when they work without a permit, it's a double fee. So whatever the permit is, they have to pay double.
Okay,
Is that the question?
all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor
Okay.
Vido?
Thank you, Mr. President. Hi, Mike. I have a couple of questions as far as, well, first I want to touch on this overtime thing. For me, I feel like, I know that we've had a concern with overtime with the fire department, and it's something that people deal with public safety across the country. But isn't the idea of overtime that, isn't the point of creating a budget so you have to avoid overtime? Is there anything that we can do internally to avoid doing that, or is it just something that's kind of inevitable because it's based on emergencies type thing?
I mean, so half of it's emergencies. I think that's inevitable. If you want to talk to the inspectors about changing their, I don't think it will ever happen, but if you could change their work schedule, work on a Saturday, we really get a lot accomplished in that 4-hour overtime on a Saturday morning. So we actually make money on that. Even though it costs us $30,000, we make way more than that issuing in fines. That's a lot of times with the illegal work is going on, so. I mean,
When you say we make money on that, what are you saying?
Between all the construction jobs that we stopped, that would have got away with doing the work, and the double fees, and the fines, a tremendous amount of fines on Saturday. More than half the fines probably are issued on Saturday. And it's over $100,000 for sure.
So Councilor Vido, he said earlier that the city last year, I don't know where the number is, somewhere in the budget, but had $270,000 worth of fines last year collected from his department, yet the overtime is only $30,000. So if half of those fines are so you're basically collecting $135,000 in fines are issued on a Saturday, and you're spending $30,000 in overtime, you're netting $100,000. That's what the state is.
Yeah, I just didn't realize that ISD was such a source of such healthy revenue. But
So I just want you could conceivably negotiate with this SEIU union and try to get someone who would agree to work a different schedule and come in on a Saturday. It would not be overtime for them, but they'd probably be looking for some differential for coming in on the weekend and not working the normal shift. And so you end up probably paying just as much as you might pay having people come in on overtime.
Or do you do something like a Tuesday to Saturday
schedule,
schedule, and now it's different, but at the same time,
You still losing some labor though. It's 4 hours of work more.
Still have to be negotiated.
Still a negotiation.
We're still in negotiation, understand?
all right, so my second part of my question is regarding reporting. I have, over the course of my time here as a counselor, asked questions of ISD multiple times, and it almost feels like I've always felt like you guys were underfunded, or maybe it's hard for you guys to keep up with the caliber of work. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I know that I've asked questions with respect to condo conversions, and you and I have gone back and forth on email getting information, and it almost is like, I'll ask a question, you give me a number, and I'm like, yeah, but what does this mean? And then you'll respond. But there's never any comprehensive real report about the information that you're collecting. Secondly, the other thing is, I remember a couple of months ago, there was a situation with us, and we were in conversation about a gentleman that owns multiple properties in Chelsea, where the apartments had multiple violations. And I remember that people were organizing around all of these violations in the apartments. And there was an action from a local organization against this landlord. But yet when I spoke to ISD, the record keeping didn't match the complaints that were in the community. So I don't know. I'm a little confused. I feel like there's a disconnect somewhere where maybe we're not tracking everything that's the violations in the units. But I guess I'm trying to figure out, how can we be better at making sure, I'm sorry, is Leo talking?
No.
Oh, I thought I heard you. I'm just trying to make sure that we're keeping adequate records that are up to date, that are reflective of what's actually happening. Because people deserve to live in dignified housing, obviously. But are we holding these landlords accountable?
So I remember that situation. That was all the violations I had. And I know that you got a lot more complaints than I had. The problem is, in this environment, at least before this crisis, people weren't calling us for housing complaints. We only got 48 housing complaints last year that we actually wrote reports on. That's pretty low. I think it's just because when someone has an apartment, they're afraid they complain, they're not gonna be able to stay there. The person's gonna start eviction proceedings eventually. So those numbers are low. That's everything I had. That gentleman, he's more abrasive than he is a terrible landlord. It's the way he treats people really more than the violations that I've seen anyway.
Yeah. But it just seemed like, because there were pictures that were brought to a public gathering of the amount of violations that were in this unit. And at that point, the tenants felt comfortable enough to come out and seek support from local activists to advocate for them. So then where's the disconnect where we're not able to access that information, or that maybe people don't feel comfortable enough coming to us? Something's got to give, is my point.
Right, so I think there was 6 apartments in that situation. Only 3 of them let us in. So we did inspect 3 of them. We never got into the other 3. I think one person left, and then when they left, they had to fix everything because we were going to inspect them. They had another tenant. So there's 2 apartments there that we might not have still been into, but we can't go in without the tenant's permission.
And can you shed a little bit of light on the condo conversion program that we did? Because the idea was that we offer resources to people where 3 families or 2 families, whatever, were being converted to condos. And so that the landlord, the owner of the property, has to offer certain resources and services to the tenants. But it seemed like some of these places, by the time they got to you, they were already vacant. So we don't really know what happened. So I'm just curious if you have any reflections or any information that you can provide to us on how we can tidy that up so that homeowners or property owners are not getting away with vacating a unit without having to comply with our ordinance.
That's exactly what's happening. So I have 2 right now. They're both vacant buildings. They're both getting renovated, and then they asked to get converted to condos. They're already vacant, both of them. So the only way to do it, I don't know how you do it, but what they're doing is they're doing their renovation. I don't know if they're evicting or asking the people to leave, and then they're doing their renovation, and then during the end of their renovation, then they're filing for a condo conversion. And that's easy. We have not had 1 occupied building filed. They're all vacant.
And that's because they know that they have to offer some type of service to the tenants. So I don't know if anybody has feedback, but that's something that we definitely should be looking at. Thank you, Mr. McAteer.
You're welcome.
I will ask that if anyone has any other questions for Mike McAteer to do so. Do you? Okay, because he has to be in the licensing board here. So we're trying to hurry you up, but.
Just a quick question, regarding some fines to management company that has so many properties in Chelsea, and is not doing the right thing. You mentioned
It's fine with me. It's fine.
company, because I heard a lot of complaints about this management company, groom.
Yeah, sure.
And have you find them?
We have found them.
I actually sent emails and pictures.
Yep. Yep.
A lot of violations. Do you guys actually?
So we do find them. I know for a fact I've seen some of his fines, but I also know, like on I think it was Easter. It was a Saturday before Easter. You did send me some pictures. I did contact him. He had everything fixed that night. So if I find him for the day of Easter, he had the space cleaned up. It was a mess the day before. If I find him that day, then he's never gonna send someone on a Sunday morning on Easter to clean it up. So in cases like that, there's been a couple times when we've called him because there has been a real bad problem. He fixes it right away. It's really hard to find him on that day, or else he'll never do it again. You kind of pick your poison in a situation like that.
So you know, there's so many properties that that was a question about not just for that.
Right.
You mentioned
Yeah, he has gotten tickets. I don't know, man. Welcome.
No,
Mike, I know you have to go. I ask anyone if they have any questions again for the inspection services, they can contact him directly. We still have 2 weeks or a week and a half before we vote on the budget, so we have time. But I'm letting him go so he can attend the license board hearing downstairs. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Next up is the Department of Public Works.
We're gonna start off on page 32 of the main document, page 32. The annotated document is page 14. And the salary document is page 23. So we just told us to get the room. 32? Page 32.
32, 14, and 23.
Page 32 of the main document, page 14 of the annotated document, and page 23 of the salary document.
Okay, Tom, do you have any other statements? No, we're moving along here.
So I suggest that there are 8 divisions in this department, so you may want to go one at a time.
We'll go one at a time.
We're gonna go one at a time.
Thank you.
I'll refer to you if you want to.
Yeah, I just want to, on DPW administration, which is the first division we'll talk about, I just want to remind the council something I said the other night, that in this administration department, we have a vacancy because Google will be going full-time to procurement. We are going to fill that position at a similar high-level business manager, just as she was, because the expectation is this person is going to be providing significant support administratively, not just to DPW, but to E911 as well. Right. So you'll see that open position in here as a business manager position at grade 11, step 6. We are not filling the junior manager position. That person has moved to central billing and will not fill that position, but we will be filling full-time the higher paid position of full-time business manager, with the expectation that that person will be providing support not just to DPW, but to E911. So with that said, I can turn the rest of this over to Fidel.
Fidel, go ahead, you have some opening statements for council.
Thank you very much, Councilor. On this particular budget, on the admin budget, what I wanted to highlight is there is an apparent increase in the salary portion of it and in the overall portion of it, but the reason for the increase is because of 311, right? So as you all know, we rolled out 311 in the fall of last year, but it really ramped up. It really ramped up this spring. And I can assure you that the rollout of 311 was to the city's benefit. We quickly hired Bernabe as the manager of 311, and now we have 2 full-time operators, Ronnie Gomez and Elsa Quesada, all Chelsea residents. And through the pandemic, we ramped up the operation of 311 to be 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and they were providing incredible support to our community, whether it was through answering questions, logistical questions about the pandemic. They served as the funnel to our hotel. They supported our food distribution efforts, and even though it might seem like an increase, I think the benefits that we are getting in terms of constituent services and overall support is something that I deeply believe in.
if I could just add one more thing to Adele's comments on the salaries. This listing of salaries is also split funded. So there are some, or I should say most, in this department that have allocations between the administrative budget, and then a portion goes to water, and a portion goes to sewer. So when you look at their breakdown, you'll see 50% in some cases, 70% in others, and you'll see the rest of their salaries in water and sewer when we start to look at those. So that's a reason also why there's a variance that's lower than what you're used to seeing.
Any questions from the councilors?
Just one. So, if I could just get it clear. So the increase of the top line, the regular salaries, is that's because of the water, the division, the sharing of the salary?
No, it's a couple of things. There's the 53rd week that we talked about previously and the appropriation from 20 that was not funded. But in addition to that, we have the 311 operation that's now in here.
Correct.
So there's a couple of variables that are happening here. You've got the junior manager position that's reduced. You've got 311 operators that are added. You've got split funding going on, and you've got all of those other things that we talked about the last couple of nights. So it's a little bit different than other departments with all of those variables.
So the reason why I asked that question is because I don't see any in overtime. So is that, I mean, there was no overtime? I know they all said they was working 7 days, 12 hours a day with the overtime showing.
Yes, so the, this portion of the budget is just the administration budget, portion of the budget, right? So in 311, actually, the majority of the increase is that Ronnie Gomez, who is now a 311 operator, was actually in another department. That position was previously as a floater in central billing. With the ramping up of our hiring in central billing, we no longer need that position allocated to central billing, and that position is going to be fully assigned to 311, as I mentioned. The overtime related to COVID-19 is going to be hopefully being requested as a reimbursement as part of the CARES Act. And it's not something that we expect to happen next fiscal year, hopefully.
Okay, thank you.
Any other councilors questions? Anything else?
In 311 operation, you said you got Bernadine, Elsa, and Gomez?
Yes.
Do you think that department is really working the way it's supposed to be?
You know, when we rolled out this department, Councilor, it was really a trial, right? I mean, 311 has been rolled out in every community around us, in Everett, in Revere, in Somerville, in Cambridge. Everyone has 311. We were the only ones that didn't have it at the time. What I can tell you is that when we went remote, right? So City Hall closes, right, in March, and basically all of our calls were forwarded to 311. So 311 became the hub of answers for City Hall, and it wasn't just, you know, answers on questions like parking tickets, like birth certificates. It was questions like, I don't have any food. What do I do? I think I need to talk to a doctor. What do I do? So really the scope of 311 has been incredibly expanded because of the virus. So to answer your question, do I think it is working? I absolutely think it's working. Can we improve it? Absolutely. And one way that we are going to improve it is that we actually have applied for another grant. So it's a Justice Department grant to fund us one additional operator. So that we have more capacity and that we can answer more phone calls.
After the grant expires, so the city will take over the money that
No, so the how the job posting is created, it's very clear that it's a grant funded position, right? So if for some reason we're able to obtain another grant to keep it funded, then obviously we will keep the position. If we cannot find money to fund that position will be terminated.
So in other superintendent is working fine and is really, it was worth it, the money that we use I complain that people don't get through. So I don't know how. That's why I asked.
Sure.
If it was worth it. I know you mentioned to me and anybody else had, but it was worth it. It was spent all the money. It was spent.
Yeah, no, I strongly believe, and I stand by the fact that we would not have been able to do what we did in the pandemic without 311. I mean, I also received those complaints, and it was the height of the pandemic, right? I mean, we were getting 400 calls per day in 311, right? I mean, so here we are, we're launching a new department, you know, with people that are learning the job, and they got thrown into the deep end, right? I mean, we certainly learned and we adjusted and we got better, but the sheer volume, the volume of calls was really hard to keep up with. And I can tell you from personal experience, I actually answered a lot of those calls to help with some capacity. And it was nonstop. I mean, it was as soon as you hung up, you picked up the phone again. And it was exhausting for a lot of our employees.
I would agree with Fidel that if not for this 311 system, we certainly would have been far less effective in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. This department was tremendously helpful to us.
Well, because actually 311 was on the front line when City Hall was closed down because there was nobody here to answer the phone at 2 o'clock.
Exactly.
Any other questions from councilors? Next.
Streets and sidewalks is next, and that starts on page 34 of the main budget document. And it is page 24 of the salary document. On the annotated version, it just keeps going until in order. So page 4, the bottom page 14 on the annotated document is where it begins. Very minimal change to the salaries. The overtime is down by 25,000. Looking at the operations lines, the streetlights are down 35,000. A couple of reasons for that. There were new installations of streetlights that have been offset in the past by capital monies and by free cash flows that have taken place in the last year or two. So that's the main reason for that. Under citywide maintenance, you have an increase of 43,000. That's street sweeping, traffic signal maintenance, pavement markings. Those are all a function of contracts that fund those positions. Under contract services, there's a drop of 46,000. Part of that is the elimination in fiscal 21 of the Suffolk County House of Correction contract. We thought that we could slice that a bit for fiscal 21, and that would help us out. The second page, you'll notice the gasoline line is down 10,000. That's a drop of 20%. We had talked about in the last few nights departments where gasoline cuts could be made based on the cost of gasoline. This is one of those departments. Overall, this streets and sidewalks budget is down 6%. 194,000. Do we have any questions?
Any questions from my colleagues? I'll have a question for you. In regards to the street lights, I know that some streets are much brighter than others. And I know that there are some that are fairly dark. Are we going to be upgrading those streets?
Absolutely. So that has been an initiative that Tom has really pushed for. So in the past 2 years, we've replaced probably about 20% of the lights. If you recall, the council gave us another $400,000 in February. So that should account for about another 25%. So in the first round, the upgrades were really focused on the arterial roads, right? So streets like Broadway, like Garfield, Sagamore, Washington Ave, Central Ave. In this other round, we're going to start going into the neighborhoods. So we have a contract now, with a contractor who's going to start, completing the upgrades actually this summer. So we are going to do another 25% of streets. And the streets that we've identified were streets that were previously requested to us, streets like Spencer Ave, and a few others. But if you have any streets in particular that you're interested in, please let me know.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Sorry, Leo, may I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. It's about pest control and just looking at the numbers from 2017, 18, 19, and then there's a huge jump to 2020, and that pretty much stays the same. What changed to have that jump? I'm sorry if I missed that.
So we really ramped up our rodent control efforts for the community, providing a program that is free to residents. We did that sometime in the 2019 period of time, actually probably 2018, because I think we did it in the middle of FY19. And then we continued it last year, and we want to continue it for FY20 because it's a very effective program and one that our residents really feel like they're getting good service on. So we want to maintain that despite the fiscal constraint, just given how well received it is by our residents.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Brown?
But I noticed all the new signage of street signs around the city. How much was that total cost this year? How much was that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a special council, a free cash request. So that free cash request went, I believe it was finally approved in February, prior to the pandemic. So it was something that after the money was approved, we actually put it out to bid. The lowest bid was a company out of Brockton, and the price of the contract was $46,000 for the signs. We did the entire installation in-house, right? Our DPW staff is completing the installation. So just to emphasize, right? The decorative street signs is something, again, that a lot of communities around us are doing, right? So if you go on Broadway in Revere, the signs look exactly the same. Instead of red, they're blue, but they're nicer, they're brighter, they're brand new, and they have the Revere city seal on them, right? In my opinion, it's a nice addition. It pops, you know, it's a very low cost way of bringing something new to our streets.
Okay, and while I got you here, I just want to congratulate you and your staff on a tremendous job of helping, collaborating with all the agencies that was helping out during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the food distribution, receiving, packaging, distributing. It was a great effort, and it was great to see you guys in action. So thank you and all your staff members.
Thank you.
In regards to the street signs, what are we doing with the old signs?
So what we have to do by law is we have to collect them. So we're amassing them at the city yard, and we are going to auction them off. So if you recall, when we replaced the marble steps in City Hall 2 or 3 years ago, that's exactly what we did. We piled them up, we collected them, and we put them out as an auction. Matt Frank actually and a few of his friends won the auction. I think there was an article on the Globe about it, and so we were planning to do exactly the same with the street signs. We're going to collect them, and sometime in the fall, we are going to hold an auction online that's going to be open to everyone, and one or multiple lucky winners are going to own quite a bit of street signs from Chelsea.
I see some of them disappear.
I got another question. We have a free back. How much money we spend and all of these street signs, the whole city, and also with every single street gonna be changed to a newer sign.
So every single sign in Chelsea is gonna be replaced. The cost of the signs was $46,000, plus the labor of DPW to install them.
But we were asking about street lights.
No,
Street
Sign,
signs.
sign. Yes, about the sign.
so every street.
Every sign in Chelsea is gonna be replaced, every sign. And you know, we're doing it in a systematic way. You know, I've gotten a few complaints that you know, sometimes the sign is not 100% accurate. If you have any complaints, please let me know and we'll get it addressed.
On the asphalt.
Yes.
We're only using those to replace some potholes, and not utilizing those on the sidewalk. We're doing regular sidewalks, we do sidewalk.
100%.
Yes, when we replace the sidewalk, we're doing concrete stuff.
You got it?
Absolutely.
I despise asphalt sidewalks.
I do too. Any other questions from my colleague?
No question from me, Mr. Chairman.
Done for him. Okay, moving on.
Moving on.
Next is snow ice, page 36, the main document, page 36. There is no salary page on this. Only one salary line is overtime, and that is the overtime for the city staff that are driving between the streets. The contract services lines, the salt, the sand, everything that goes into keeping our streets clear. Under the contract services, it will include the blue light pagers, some maintenance on the vehicles, servicing on vehicles and such. Very straightforward. We funded it, level funding each year.
And it's typically insufficient, so just about every year I come to you with an additional supplemental request, as I will be doing Monday night for this year.
What are the number?
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna ask, what are the number of trucks that we use for snow removal? I know we've got some new vehicles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have been very aggressive in replacing the older vehicles. So the latest acquisition was our biggest truck yet. It's a 10-wheeled truck that we are proud of. Our fleet is probably up to 30. The idea is that we have we split up all of the streets into routes. We have 11 neighborhood routes plus one arterial route, and so it's a balance, because on the arterial routes you want a big truck, right? Like on Marginal Street, on Broadway, on Webster, but on the smaller streets like Warren Ave or like a few streets in Prattville and Maverick, for example, are narrow and are tight, right? So we have to balance the accessibility of our smaller streets and maintaining the big arterials.
We're able to use the new trash truck to plow.
We are going to. So we have one trash truck right now. You approved a second truck. So we're hoping that by having two trucks, it is more reliable. We don't have to put all of our wrecks in one basket.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else?
I have a question about I have a question. That's okay. I have a question just quickly about the sand. No, the salt. I'm sorry, the salt. Why is that so low, 2020?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically funded at the same level. I mean, salt is something that we buy depending on the level of storms, right? Okay. So we buy what we actually need.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just add, for the council's benefit, the three columns to the left are actual numbers. 17, 18, and 19 are actual numbers. Fiscal 20 is a budget and 21 is a budgeted. So as the city manager mentioned a few minutes ago, we'll be coming to council next week with supplemental requests for these lines. So the 28th is insufficient.
So there is a strategic reason why we don't increase this budget, even though every year it's insufficient. And that's because you are allowed by, this is one of the rare accounts that you're allowed by law to go into deficit on. The Department of Revenue allows it. But they only allow you to do that if you funded it the current year, the same amount of money you funded the previous year. So if you increase it, you're stuck with that increase forever. You can't ever reduce it. So we keep it at this low level and we spend what we need to spend. But if we increased it to say 400,000 for FY21, we could never reduce it below 400,000 for the rest of the time we were sitting, or we can't deficit spend in the account.
Okay, thank you.
Council Lopez?
With contract service, how many contractors we have, and we pay them even though doesn't know?
So for the last 2 years at least, we have really focused on ramping up our staff, ramping up our vehicles, and ramping up our training. Last year, we had 0 contract. So it is our goal, both Lou and I, to do 100% of it in-house, right? So the goal is to do it entirely in-house. But of course, we need to have an option B. So every year we call the contractor, we get them certified. So that if for some reason, we have we get into a bind, we have another option if we need it. But we don't really rely on them. We don't want to use them. Any other councilors have any questions for the DPW on snow?
All set, no question.
Okay.
Next is the
Solid waste.
Yeah, solid waste. Page 37, the main document, 37. The main document, 16 of the annotated pages, and page 22. No, that's out of order, sorry, on the salaries, we have to go back to page 22 of the salary readouts. There is one person who was assigned to this department, it's my son-in-law. This one salary is representative of that one person. If you look at the operations line, you'll see that the trash pickup and disposal line is increased significantly. That's a result of an increase of 3% in the contracts related to solid waste, recycling, yard waste, and such. We also fund in this line the stockpile spoil removal from the sewers, and recycling cost adjustments are associated with that program are included in this line. Overall, the line is up 6.5%. Any questions on solid waste?
So you have one salary person in this department, but I see a bunch of guys who are out there. So how does that work? It's not just Mike picking up the trash. You do have a few other guys with waste pickup. So how is it the separation, I guess, is not why there isn't more people in this department? Yeah, so we don't assign any guy or any staff members to trash, right? I mean, we have 25 staff members in streets and sidewalks, right? I mean, and for their benefit and our benefit for training purposes, for morale, for everything. I mean, we try to rotate our work, right? So not one single person is assigned to trash, right? I mean, you see Steve on trash on one day and John on another, right? I mean, we do it for a multitude of reasons, but we don't assign staff to trash. Okay. Except Mike. Mike is his role, right? His role is intended to be a trash education person, but and it's mostly on recycling, right? So originally his efforts were 100% related to reducing the amount of trash on our sidewalks that is related to trash, and also to increase our recycling percentage, right? So he is truly doing 100% trash and recycling at all times. Councilors, anyone have any questions?
Just got one question.
Councilor,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So how's the response with all the 25 staff members that at any given day they could be taking off trash and be putting on, delivery down at the shipyard or how's that working and how long has that been implemented?
so we think that rotation of staff is absolutely critical, right? I mean, our goal is so that all of our guys know how to do everything, right? So you know how to do trash, you know how to do asphalt, sidewalks, planting trees, and it's critical to rotate our staff, right? And no one likes to do trash on a day like today, right? It was 90 degrees outside. It was, it's not easy work. It's really physical work, right? So it's a balance between us getting our job done, that's absolutely critical, and us ensuring that we have reliable, happy, and consistent staff, right? So our two supervisors at the city yard do an incredible job at managing, those things, right? I mean, but it is absolutely a balancing act.
But what's the incentive? I mean, something like you said, so no one wants to do trash on today. You rotate it in. You seem like you have to know every job in the yard there, whether it's picking up trash, whether it's stocking at the stockyard or the yard. What's the incentive? Do they get a pay increase?
No. So all of our guys are actually graded at the same pay, right? So we don't have levels in DPW for the most part. We do have two foremen, but that's a very different story. The incentive is we try to create a sense of teamwork, right? A sense of morale. So there's many times I can tell you that we assigned some work to someone and then someone else would volunteer instead, right? I mean, we have an incredible bunch of staff members in DPW. I mean, and they have created a really family environment in DPW.
I like the concept and I understand the concept. I'm just wondering at some point someone starts and someone's been there for 15 years and someone's been there for 5 years and they're doing the same exact job they're required to by this manner. I just don't see the initiative. I mean, I just don't see the incentive, but if it works, it's work. It sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lopez.
Please explain about the commercial cabin for the 2 million, 133. Was that how much we pay to dispose of trash?
Sure. So there's two main contracts that are funded out of that line, right? One is the actual pickup of the trash, which is Russell Disposal, right? And the other large contract is us paying the landfill to take it, right? So the with Russell Disposal with both actually we're tied into contractual amounts, right? So one thing that has really been increasing this line is the cost of recycling, right? So as you all know, and it's a story that we have been coming to you for some time now, in the past 5 years, the cost of recycling has really skyrocketed, right? So when 5 years ago, communities would get paid to give things like paper or cardboard. Now, recycling costs more than trash, right? So the reason why this particular line item in the budget is going up is because recycling is just really impacting not only Chelsea, but a lot of our communities.
Trash containers, 506, that's how much we spend per week to supply the trash container to the whole city?
No, so trash containers was actually zero.
That's not budgeted, that was a prior year, free cash.
That's how much we spent. Yes, that's how much we spent.
And how about the $10,000 public works programs, what programs are there?
Yes, last year, we moved this into solid waste, right? So this is how we fund things like the request, from the beautification committee, right? So if someone requests signs to incentivize our residents not to throw trash on the ground, if we're asked to, you know, to install flowers on a regular, you know, on an area. This is how we fund that program, right? But in the past, it was called the beautification program. In the past, we have moved it to solid waste, and it was the same last year, and we continue to fund it at the same level. I think it's very important.
Yeah, but I don't know all those things. Last question, do we still do fines for the trash people who don't do the right way their trash in the sidewalk? Is it even fine or no more?
So we have issued a lot less fines, right, than before. With the rollout of the trash barrels, right? I mean, we were gearing up to issue fines to people who were not using our trash barrels. You know, we started giving them notices in January and in February, and unfortunately, the pandemic hit. Right, so with the onset of the pandemic, I mean, we have absolutely stopped any finding, you know, and probably for the next few months. I mean, we are going to focus on education, on giving people notices, because we know that our folks in the community are going to be very strapped, you know. So we don't want to increase the burden on them.
Is the $10,000 that he was talking about, is that similar to, like, say, the canvas bags?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely. Great example.
Councilors, any other questions?
I do. I have a question about the fining. Fidel, is that something that you're responsible for fining people, your department?
So there's two types of fining, right? So inspectional services is responsible for fines in private property, right? So if someone is dumping trash inside of their backyard or in private property, it's inspectional services. Public Works is responsible for issuing fines on the public right of way. So for example, if you put your trash barrel and it's overflowing, we can issue you a fine. Or if we find you completing illegal dumping on the sidewalk, we can issue a fine.
And what about businesses? Where does that fall?
So it'll be the same. If it's inside of the private property, it's ISD. If it is on the sidewalk or on the street, it is Public Works.
So the grounds of, let's say, Tedeschi or whatever it is now, the grounds around it, who's finding that?
Inspectional services.
Okay.
So if it's inside of the property line, it's inspectional services. If it's on the sidewalk or on the street, it's Public Works.
Okay.
But I just want to clarify, if their trash is out on the public way and it's overflowing, we can fine. If the front of their property on the public way has a lot of trash, there's no legal requirement for any business owner to clean a public property that exists in front of their business. That there is no statute. It's not the same as the statutory obligation to remove snow. That's a specific statutory obligation that exists. There is no similar statutory obligation for cleaning trash that's on your public sidewalk in front of your business. That's unfortunately the city's responsibility. But if you put your trash barrels out on our public way and they're overflowing, we could fine you for having trash on the public way in a way that's a violation of our.
Okay, thank you.
There's one more thing, Mr. President, I just want to add on this budget, if I could, just sort of a heads up for next fiscal year 22. This is the last year of our 5-year contract with Russell Disposal. We will go out to bid this year for a new trash contract. I doubt Russell will bid because they're teetering on the verge of being out of business. I expect this line item to grow significantly in fiscal year 22 under a new contract. There's no vendor that's gonna come in anywhere near what Russell is charging us for this.
Tom, in that question, is this when the regionalization bid may come into play, or is that not possible?
I mean, there are cities who try to do this stuff regionally, and that wouldn't be a bad idea. The problem is, I don't know that we're on the same cycle as most of the communities around us, which would make it most efficient for anyone to be bid. So if Revere's contract were coming up and Everett's were coming up and Chelsea were coming at the same time, we could gather together and do a bid. We should probably inquire of those communities as to when their contracts are up and see, because we could gain some efficiency if we did together. I just don't know where they stand. And I will also tell you that I know in a community like Revere, at least it was when I was there, they will not go with a non-union contract. So even if they're a very low bid.
They will,
They will not.
They will not. So whoever wins the bid has to be unionized.
Typically, they have found ways to reject non-union.
Okay.
I got a question. I have a question.
Most of my.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you. So, Mr. Manager, you said if they do not bid next year, then we should be aware of the increase. Is that going to come from purchasing equipment or salaries?
It'll just be the bid price. So we're going to go out to bid for a vendor to both collect our trash and collect our recycle, and presumably pay to dispose. You know, we have a separate contract to dispose of our solid waste, our own contract with Wheelabrator, but we don't have any contract with any recycling facility to dispose of our recycling. So we build that into our trash collection contract, and Russell picks up the tab of our recycling. Next year, we may not even get a contractor to pick up the tab for recycling. We may have to go out and look for a recycling disposal place to take our recycling as an entirely separate contract. I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, what's happening right now, and both Tom and I are starting the conversations with the communities that have Russell currently. They are down to really 4 communities that still have contract with Russell, and 2 of the communities have given them notice. So Russell, I can assure you that Russell will not be bidding on the next cycle. They are either going to get out of the business or stay with with Somerville, right? As their only contract, their facility is in Somerville, their garage is in Somerville, so they are able to provide really aggressive pricing on Somerville, but they only have the trash, right? So what I foresee, what's going to happen in the next cycle is that big companies like Waste Management that have facilities of their own are going to use that as a leverage point, right? To basically kick the smaller players out of the market.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Capital Waste, exactly. Capital Services, Waste Management, Republic Services. Those are going to be the ones that are going to stay in business.
Have you had any contact with Jetaway?
Not yet. Council Lopez.
You guys said that maybe Russell will be here for the contract. You guys think for buying our own truck, or I would do it on or the food center?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at it. My position is that right now we are 100% dedicated to water and sewer, right? So over the past 12 months and the next 12 months, we are going to be 100% dedicated on making sure that the transition from RH White to the city of Chelsea is going to be smooth, right? So honestly, I don't think we have the capacity to take also trash and recycling. So, you know, my recommendation to everyone is we need to focus right now on water and sewer, right? I mean, and we've seen what it takes to take it on, right? I mean, we have to purchase equipment, we have to hire staff, we have to train staff, we have to ensure they have the licenses. It is not something that can be done overnight.
One question, what are we paying for time?
So per ton of trash is about $70. $70, and while recycling, what was as high as 120 a ton. Any other questions? Seeing none, okay, we'll move on to the next portion, our structures and grounds.
Structures and grounds, so this is page 39 of the main budget document, page 39, page 16 in the annotated document, page 25 on the salary document.
Sorry, what page on the salary?
Salary is page 25. This department funds 5.5 positions. There are 4 buildings craftsmen positions. Those individuals who work in all of our public buildings except the schools. There is 1 night watchman position here and 2 greeters. You see in the main lobby, top of the main lobby. Drop of $10,000 in overtime. Moving down to the operations lines, both heat and lighting are down significantly, 14,000 in heat, 39,000 in lighting. The main reason for that is due to energy improvements in several of the buildings that we've already made. We expect this will result in less expenses. Look at the other lines on the page, there are variations of drops. The elements done a good job of recognizing lines here that can be cut because of what we're facing in 21. Turn to the next page. I'll call your attention to the other expenditure line, which is up 103,000. This is the line that funds the property taxes for a parcel on marginal street. The city owns. The rental company, car company occupies that site. We have an agreement with them where we talked tonight about us paying for capital improvements at that site. This is the tax collection. The property tax that is owed at 324 marginal is funded through this line. Reason for the increase, the main reason for the increase is that there was a FY20 revaluation of the property, which resulted in a large increase. So this number is what we think is the best estimate at our FY21 tax. Overall, this budget is up slightly, 0.70%, $11,000. Questions on buildings and grounds?
Councilors, anyone with any questions? Seeing
Not
none.
for me.
Councilor Brown, do you have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay. Central billing.
Central billing. So this goes back ways. We're going to turn back page 16 in our budget, main budget document, page 16. Page 6 in the annotated budget document, page 10.
Oh, sorry.
In the salary document. Page 10 in the salary document, page 16 in the main document. This
On the salary.
is the department responsible for.
What page is that?
What, on the salary?
Page 16 on the main document,
6 on the
page
annotated.
6 on the annotated, page 10 on the salary document. This department is responsible for water, sewer, and trash billing every month. There's a drop of $41,000. The main reason for that is that there is restructuring here, and we've got 2 positions funded rather than 3 coming into fiscal 21. There is a drop of $10,000 in the data processing field. That has to do with a portal reduction on one of the contractors, portal for signing in and getting one of the 2 readings. This line, data processing funds the annual licensing and services for the water billing system and also the mailing as well. Questions on central billing?
Anyone? Bueller? You got? Some people get it.
Is it to the proper age category?
Water, I'm sorry, sewer enterprise.
We have a separate document for the sewer enterprise. It's a smaller document that you would have received along with the larger 58 page. It's a 6-page document, it's a supplemental for water and sewer. So that's the document we go to. That's the main budget document. Title of that page is Supplementary Budget Information, Water and Sewer Enterprise. 6-page document. The annotated pages begin on page 17. And the salary pages near the end of the book, page 32. So the main budget document is a supplementary document of 6 pages. The annotated document, page 17. And salary documents, page 32. The top in the administration section of DPW at the very beginning of this section about the student funding for a number of people there. This is where you see the other parts of that student funding. Administrative team. First part of that salary chart is the administrative or water. And the bottom part is the in-house operation for water and sewer. See the readout of all those positions as they ramp up that operation. So, number of positions here, 23 in total. Increases here are a result of bringing on some of those positions. The overtime line is increased. That's a substantial increase, and that's because we ramped up in fiscal 20. We didn't have positions funded at the beginning of the year. We gradually hired those positions. So the overtime was limited. We expect the overtime to be at full capacity in 21. Look at the operations lines. The most significant drop in operations is the citywide maintenance line, dropped almost 800,000. That is the elimination of the RA White contract, which was the maintenance for water and sewer system as we brought that in-house. We have now that cost associated on the city side. Gasoline on the second page has been dropped by $5,000 or 16%. The MWRA assessment is lower. Current debt, slight increases as a result of some bonding increases that we're doing in the fiscal 21 CIP. The infrastructure of 200, the stormwater management of 100, those were both included in the CIP revised document that we received. So this is the sewer budget. You want me to stop here for questions and move on to the water budget?
Colleagues, are there any questions on the sewer portion of the budget? No. Council Lopez, and please move your mask when you ask questions. They can't hear you.
We got each white. We actually, as you mentioned before, I just want to hear you. So we saving money, and why is that? Like this company.
Go ahead, Lou. So Lou prepared a few remarks. If you don't mind, I'll turn it over.
We'll keep it at 2 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously, you know that I serve as the Deputy Commissioner of Public Works, along with Fidel, to support Fidel. My role in the city is also to be the city engineer. So I'm involved in a lot of projects from the engineering side. But for the next 2 years, my role is also going to be to serve as essentially what we're referring to as the WSD superintendent. WSD stands for Water, Sewer, Drain. We're trying to kind of brand something different than Chelsea Water and Sewer or White Water and other things that you've heard. About 5 weeks from now, WSD actually officially replaces RH White, who's been a contract operator in the city since 1992. My number one focus, probably for the last 12 months and for the next 2 years, is basically going to be to make sure that this operation is top notch. I'm setting a goal for us is, you know, we want to be the best water and sewer department in the state or in New England. We want to be looked at that way. In order to do that, you know, we've got a lot of work in front of us. We're here obviously to talk about the budget, but I want to make sure something kind of bigger gets stated here. We've got a great team of people, many of whom have come from the successful side of our Streets and Sidewalks group. Others that we brought in from outside to bring in more horsepower and technical capabilities than we had inside. We've also gotten great, you know, excellent support along the way from the city council and the city manager, other city departments. And I personally want to, you know, acknowledge Fidel and all the support that he's given me to help take this idea of taking over a department and actually making it a success. So the answer to your question is, are we going to save money? The answer is yes. A couple of things I would just want to point out to answer that, and then you can ask, I guess, line by line questions if anybody is interested in that, is our goal was to identify how to do this work better, build an appropriate staff to be able to do that better, but also to figure out how to do it more cost effectively. So from the staffing side, we came to the council originally with a plan and a budget that called for 13 staff. 3 people were associated with sort of the management side, and 10 people were associated with the field side. We're starting out this operation with only 2 people instead of 3 in the management side, and I'm serving as the 3rd person for at least the next 2 years until we can get this thing to be up and running properly and cost effective. On the field side, we're starting out with 7.5 full-time equivalent people as opposed to 10. So we're already starting sort of ramped down from what we originally got approval from city council. So just to put that in dollar terms, what we originally came to the council with, just throw the glasses on here. What we originally came to the council with was a plan that had a price tag somewhere around $1.43 million. At the time, by comparison to RH White's contract value of $1.78 million, we were looking at a savings of about $355,000. In the process of what we've actually submitted through some kind of reworking of numbers, acknowledging that we weren't going to get a full complement of staff, and some reductions that we thought we could live with and still do a credible job, we were able to take $430,000 off of that number. So what we're coming in this year is a number that is basically $1 million. The equivalent version of that through RH White's contract is going to be $1,785,000. So I would say essentially we're saving about $785,000. Now that's just an analysis of what RH White costs are versus what we budgeted now to perform the same service. So we think we've saved a lot of money. When you try to take that analysis and then mash it up against last year's budget versus this year's budget, it gets a little hairy because like it'll be a whole lot clearer from FY21 to FY22 because FY20, many of the costs really were sort of the startup and the ramp up. So we were phasing down some things, phasing up some others, but it was not a typical year. Most every other budget that we review, we're comparing last year typical to this year typical with not a whole lot of differences in variation of services. Here, we're taking on a contract operator. Just like if we were to take over the trash, there'd be a radical difference in trying to analyze it because we're doing it in a completely different way. I'd be happy to answer questions on the line items, but I didn't want to let the conversation of this go without amplifying where the real savings are.
Yeah, so this, issue was still here, or they leave it on July 1st?
So,
July 21st.
yes, so the, on July 22nd, they will no longer be here. July 22nd is the date.
So explain to me
Yes,
that we have already hired people.
yes.
We're still paying H&R.
RHY, correct.
So where's the gain gonna come from with the balance?
Yeah, so if you recall, in last year, you know, we came to the city council and we said, hey, we want to take this over. We think we could do it. But in order to do it, we are going to need an overlay, right? Because as I was telling you with the trash, it's not something that you can turn on, right? So in this past 12 months, we've had to hire people, we've had to train them, we've had to take our staff and give them licenses and things like that. So we think that that the one-time expense that we asked for, right, in last fiscal year came from retained earnings, right? So that was a one-time request that we will never ask for again. And it's kind of like when you start a business, right? When you start a business, you gotta build a storefront. You gotta buy tables. You gotta buy chairs. It's not something that you're gonna have to do every year. But essentially, we're starting our own water and sewer business.
Right, that I understand. We're talking money, so we're paying H&R. Then we brought on our own people to pay. Now we're saying we're gonna save X amount of dollars by doing that in the first year. And I'm trying to figure out how are we doing that if we're paying out over here.
Yeah,
And paying here.
absolutely.
And we keep these projections and we're gonna bring in X amount of dollars. I don't know how we're gonna make that threshold that you're looking at.
So
FY 21 is where we're seeing the savings, because the difference between what we would have paid at RH White in FY 21 is $1.7 million. We are not paying them that.
Right.
Instead, we're taking over the cost, and our costs to do that are considerably less than $1.7 million.
And what's our number?
About $1 million.
$1 million.
So there's about a $780,000 savings there.
But I do hear your cost
to RH White.
I'm sorry.
They're saying, Leo is trying to say that they're still on the books for some amount. So what is the amount that they're still on the books for, and for how long?
Yeah, what's the offset
I don't think they're on because of 21.
for 22.
There is a payment that we owe them because of 20.
Correct.
They're not included in this budget.
All right, so come July 4th, 2020, there is no longer any payment to RH White.
No,
No, there is. There's $100,000. We owe them. Part of the agreement was we would pay them $100,000. So there's still some lingering payment to them for the rest of fiscal year 21. But it's built into this budget, and it's part of the total cost against which we're saving money. So the savings that we identified includes that money that we're still paying RH White. There's just a little tail end of payments to them for the rest of FY 21. It's included in this budget, but you'll still see when you're in this budget how significantly down these two budgets are.
Yeah, well, if you recall, Councilor, when we came originally, we showed you a 5-year view, right? Because the initial expense that was approved in the budget for FY 20 included the purchase of vehicles, right? So those vehicles are going to last 5, 10, 15 years, right? So you know, what we are, our startup cost, when you look at it on 5 years, is gonna be very, very big.
Didn't we buy RH White vehicles?
We did.
So they've been in use now for how many years?
So in the contract with RH White, the language actually stated that every 5 years they had to buy new vehicles. So actually, the vehicles that they have right now are fairly new. But I mean, and we're buying them.
They're only 3 years old.
We're buying them, you know, at a much less amount, much less than we would, you know, we're buying a car off the lot, basically, right?
And if we extend the life cycle of those vehicles by even another year or 2 years, we just keep picking up more and more savings. I mean, I understand and respect what you're asking and the concept of it. And the short answer is, we're not going to save nearly as much in the first year as part of the startup, just like any other business. I will bet my reputation on it, as I have, because this was my crazy idea. The city doing this is not going to save a little money. The city's doing this is going to save an enormous amount of money, and the level of service is going to go up infinitely. We've already seen that because we're doing things in a way that they were never obligated or compelled to do, despite being paid far more than we can do it for.
Yeah, I think I need to emphasize that, because even though we are saving significant money, part of the rationale for doing this was to get better service to our residents. And I feel very confident that the level of service our residents are going to get from our DPW is going to far exceed the service they would get from our.
I'll give you one example. For the last 4 months, our guys have worked directly with their guys to go out and update all the service cards for all the valves in the city. And our guys are coming back and telling us that their guys can't find their own valves that they've been paying attention to for 28 years. Well, in other words, our guys are helping them figure out how to do something that they were supposed to do for a long time. And when you can't find a valve in the middle of a water main break, the water that's gushing everywhere is like a cash register. It's like taking a taxi cab to work and having it stay out front. All that water that's blowing everywhere is passing through MWRA's cash register, and we aren't selling it.
Yeah, and on the level of service, right? I mean, typically we you know, the shortfalls in water and sewer are mostly seen in a water main break, right? So in the past 6 months, we have made it a point of responding to every water main break, and in some cases recently, RH White, you know, we waived them off. So on Sagamore Avenue, it was one example, right? We showed up, so both Lou and I, we were there in minutes of the water main break. We were able to identify those valves. We shut it off. We saw the break. It was fixed, and it was fixed properly. It wasn't a Band-Aid. We went 100% because it's our asset. Right, in 2 years, when something happens again, we're going to be there again, right? Where with a contractor, you know, they are just looking at the invoice, right? How do we bill it? We are looking at, you know, at responding to our counselors who we're going to come in and ask for other things. We are also trying to build for the future. And I mean, I just want to emphasize that Sagamore Avenue, I think was one case example of what it can be like if we're running the show.
Was Tubbs the contractor that fixed the thing?
Tubbs was the contract.
Any questions from the council? No?
Can I just suggest that we go through the water budget quickly, because I have a comment to make about this happens over. I don't think there's gonna be a difference between what we talk about here in water and what we just saw in sewer. The budgets for water and sewer are 50% funded on salaries, so the same number that you saw in sewer, you're gonna see in water for salaries. They're just split 50-50. So the salary worksheets, page 33, 32, and 33 are identical for that reason. These are separate funds. When you vote your budget, the reason they're on separate pages is they're not part of the general fund. The general fund is the vote that you'll take for the 181 million. This is gonna be totaling 9 for water, 13 for sewer, so you'll take 4 votes when you're ready to take your votes. These 3, the general fund, the water fund, the sewer fund, and the stabilization support. On the water budget, besides the salaries being the same, you'll notice a similar drop in citywide maintenance, this time at 705,000. That is also due to the orange white dropout. The MWRA assessment is up, where the sewer is down. There's a formula that goes with that, we can probably talk more about if there's a question about that, but the formula has to do with consumption and flow, and they charge us and assess us going forward into 21. So there is an increase in the water, there is a decrease in the sewer. The maturing debt is up because we have some bonding that you saw in the CIP that is associated with the water and WRA bonding, and we've got a few infrastructure and other capital increases. So overall, the water budget is down 4.2%, the total is 9 million. If there are questions on water, I suggest the questions are the same. Most of the water and sewer have specific lines that have some differences in operations, but not many.
I think that's the line of questioning that we heard is gonna be similar, because they're both sort of one department. So, any questions? I don't think so, aside from that, so, all right? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
If there's any follow-up questions, counselors, feel free to email me or the city manager directly.
You know, I just wanted to say, to reiterate, I think what Councilor Brown already said, thank you so much. I saw firsthand what a great job your team did in really quickly moving and making a system work to address the needs of the pandemic. And I mean, it was unbelievable. And not just to use, Mr. Andresino, you deserve a lot of the credit too for that. So thank you.
Thank you. No, I mean, the credit goes to our guys. I mean, any other team would have said, no, this is not my job. I'll go home. I can work from home. And we had, we did not have a single issue with our staff. I mean, you saw them out there. They were handing out food. They were helping people.
It was unbelievable. I'm telling you. I mean, I saw it because I was there too. And so I really want a very heartfelt thank you. There's a lot of people out there in Chelsea. They got a lot of help on this because of not just your efforts, but your team's efforts. And they were fantastic every time I saw them.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll pass that on.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm gonna move the microphone to the corner, allow you to sit there, and then so that we can better hear you.
Hold that here.
And we'll just lower the mask when you speak.
Yeah. Thank you.
Probably for a while, we can't hear you.
It's the mask, it's the air conditioning, it's the projection, microphone. They need one more of those.
Hey, can I ask you a quick question before we start? So I might be able to help with this.
Well, that's what he asked. He says it's built into that.
I looked at that.
My email, my plans.
pages and come back. They're under some strict guidelines. Ecuador. Ecuador, they were body was the streets. So trying to figure out. I don't. Yeah, works too. How these going? Pretty streamlined? Watch you guys. No one figured out.
So she owes us big time.
Yeah, because I remember you were talking about uniforms and guns, and they said, no, I go, really? I go, what about last year? They go, I go, oh my God, okay, whatever.
We got one shit.
Yeah, they do, it's a good relationship, a good partnership. Okay, everyone, starting our next department, we have Chief Ties from the Police Department. And in our, if you turn to the main budget, it'll be on page 21. On the annotated city manager's proposed budget, it is page 9. And on the employee line item, it starts on page 14. So with that, I'll allow Ed to begin and then followed by the chief, by Tom and then the chief follows.
Thank you. So on page 21, the regular salaries for the police department are funded at 9.4 million. This is a force total of 107 SWAT officers. There are 28 secretaries, the chief, 78 patrolmen. There are 4 position reductions in fiscal 21 patrol force. There are 115 total positions funded. Police department has some grant money, not much. There's $150,000 worth of recovery coming back on this budget. The Narcan stipend is down slightly, the longevity is up, Narcan stipend is down, position is down. Piece of that stipend every school office receives that every year. Looking at the operations lines are level funded with the exception of one. That's the gasoline line on page 22. It's down 20%. Overall, this budget is down to total $70,000 or 1/2. And entertain any questions?
Tom, any questions?
Yeah, before the chief speaks, we have funded this budget at a contingent of 107 officers. The entire time I have been city manager, we have funded this at 111 contingent. We've always fluctuated because it's hard to keep the contingent at 111. There are retirements, it takes time to get people in the academy. It was 111, in my opinion, was a good contingent. I've always funded at 111. But this year, when COVID hit and with the constraints we were under, I made a decision in collaboration with the chief that we would only fund what we had as of spring, what what we had as of the spring was a contingent of 170. A few of those people were in the academy. They have now graduated from the academy. In fact, we swore in today the last 3 of those officers. That is our contingent right now, 107, and that is what we received for FY21. I will also say that I do not think this is an inflated police budget. This is a reasonable police budget. And I think it should be funded as presented. If there is concern that we could be spending money in other locations, social services, I'm more than willing to confer with the council and direct more money there when we are in a position to do so. But I think this is a fair and reasonable police budget. And as you can see, it is reduced from what it was this year. With that said, I'll let the chief make his comment.
How's everyone doing? This is unique, but it seems to work out really good. I was in the other room and I saw the DPW's presentation. It seems to be done very efficiently, and it's become the new world as far as how we work and operate remotely, at least for now. But I think rather than just kind of go on, I agree with Tom. I'm here certainly to answer any questions for those of you guys at home, and certainly those of you present in this room. But yeah, I totally agree. I think that initially when Tom and I had the discussions, I thought and feel confident that 111 is a strong number. But I do realize, you know, with the budget shortfalls or the projections and so forth, that 107 seems reasonable. We'll absolutely make that work. Again, I'm here to entertain any specific questions that you may have.
Chief, can you give us, based on what you have for manpower right now, can you tell us, we've had, I don't want to jinx it, but it seems that maybe the number of calls or reported crime has gone down, and it could be a number of factors, not just city of Chelsea. So with that being said, how do the numbers that you're looking at right now, and what is different today than you've seen, say, 5 years ago, and what is policing in Chelsea like today compared to what you've seen 5 years ago?
Sure. So the number of officers that I've been here, so this is my 33rd year. So I've seen a lot in terms of the department size kind of grow over the years. I've seen a lot in terms of the crime levels that we've experienced in the city. There was a time that we were always playing catch up with the number of officers that we had. When I come on the job, we had 75 officers. That was never enough. We had 2 officers, 2 units on the street, 2 officers in one cruiser, 2 officers in another, and a supervisor. It was just totally never enough. We were overrun. Over the years, we were always looking to get to a target above 100. As crime increased over the years, we kind of had a target at one point of about 120 officers to do the job. And perhaps that might sound like 120 officers in Chelsea today. No, it's based on spread out over shifts and different things. I think I mentioned in some of the council meetings in the past, the magic number was 5, meaning we have 5 officers on each squad, 2 squads work at a time, so there's 10. We have an impact shift, which is hours at 5 o'clock at night to 3:30 in the morning, which is 5 on one shift and 5 on another. So at the end of the day, mathematically, with the number of officers, to your point, crime has definitely gone down. I'm a firm believer that when people look at crime stats across a region or across the state or across the country, they're not equally applied. It depends on what's being done in those individual areas. I think in Chelsea, we've been extremely proactive over the years. We've had the ability, based on the size of our department, based on the willingness for the officers to really be involved in things beyond law enforcement. So it's not just officers in a car taking calls. And as a result of crime going down, to potentially scale back from 107 to 100 to, pick your number. I think that our ability to remain proactive, to stay on top of things, to partner with the community, to be at different events that are, honestly, it's kind of, some of these events have really nothing to do with policing, but many of these events are police-led. Many of these events are really breaking barriers with some of these young folks that'll be in the age group of 14, 15, and then in their 20s soon enough. So the idea is we're really trying to get ahead of things. And I say trying to get ahead. We have been getting ahead, even going back the last 10, 15 years this philosophy that we have and the way that we assign our officers and work with all these groups and so forth. I think, so my prejudiced view, I guess, is a function of all that we've done over the past 15 years to get to the point now over the last few years that knock on wood, that, we haven't had a homicide in Chelsea in 3 years. Violent crime has gone down in significant chunks. What you guys have heard many times, I think in different presentations, that there was a time when we had that tag or that label of being the 8th most dangerous city in the country. Certainly wasn't proud of that. That goes back to 2010, 2011. Over the years, that ranking, if you will, from one of the organizations out there was neighborhoodscout.com. We went from 8 to 14 to 27 into the 40s, into the 60s, and now well out of the 100. So we're not in the top 100. Violent crime in Chelsea, this is kind of one of my concerns, is violent crime in Chelsea for a long time. The actual violent crimes of murder, rape, aggravated assault, and robbery was on average about 600 violent crimes a year. That number has been greatly decreased to around 200 a year. The violent crime rate, the property crime rate, and the overall crime rate has gone down as a result. So I think that the mechanism we have in place as far as the structure of the police department, the organizational structure, is sound. Tom, as the manager, when he approached me and said, Brian, can this work with 107? And just to throw it out there, because Tom had just mentioned it, we have never even attained that 111. We're always trying to get there, but there's someone retiring. You hire someone, that process, I could bore you with that, how long that takes, but hiring someone, training someone, well over a year. So we're always behind the 8 ball in that regard. But long way of answering your question, hopefully this answers some other questions. I think that what we have, the structure we have in place in the budget that's being presented, I think is reasonable based on, again, we know that we have a small city area-wise, but we have a lot of folks that live here. And something potentially could erupt at any time. It could carry on for a number of days, if not longer. So I think that the manning we have, the staffing we have is sufficient to sustain any problems down the road.
You forgot to mention, I think, I've noticed or I've heard of, because I have some, obviously we all have some relationships with our office, we're a small community. So in addition to that, we hear of transfers. We've lost a number of officers who have gone on to, say, Everett or Cambridge, where their pay is higher. So you feel this, I understand that. You talk about catching up and the 107, 111. As part of the catch-up, maybe it's about, being able to respond to the level of crimes and calls, but I'm curious to know, because it's never presented, what do our open caseloads look like? And not just obviously we're not talking about murder cases that are still outstanding and not closed yet, but you report a crime and then the follow-up. What does that look like with the level of staff you have? How does your open case work level look at the present moment?
So it's fairly, top of my head, and what I've seen over the years looking at the data, it's fairly consistent with the national data, meaning when we have violent crimes, the clearance rate on violent crimes is usually pretty high. It's usually anywhere from like 70 to 80%. A lot of people want to, not if they want to. Oftentimes, we have more people willing to come forward and participate as witnesses and as victims in court with violent crimes. Whereas property crimes, someone breaks a window in a vehicle late at night and they steal something, the clearance rate on those are fairly low, probably anywhere from 20 to 25%. That's pretty much with the national average. I don't know necessarily if that's more of a function that even if we had 200 police officers or we only had 50, that would change much. A lot of that has to do with just the way that, structure of society is set up. Someone commits a property crime when no one's around. Although, I mean, arguably, that with technology, that definitely has changed. That we now, without, matter of fact, anytime there's a crime, we have 150 cameras in the city. We have multiple private cameras in businesses and homes. We always, the first thing we do, especially, certainly if there's a violent crime, is look around, where are the cameras? We canvass the neighborhood 3 in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the morning, and retain all that video. So that has helped significantly. Murphy's Law is always at play. We have a motor vehicle that fled away. What do we have? Do we have a plate? No. Do we have a rough description of a car? Yes. Do we know the make and model? Not really, because a lot of them are they're so close in cars, but we have technology with something called NIBIN, where when there's shots fired and there's rounds that are left, or shell casings that are left at the scene, we have the ability to submit those to the ATF. And this has been great in that they can connect shots fired in Chelsea with shots fired in Lowell, with shots fired in Lynn, where they may have a clue that we don't have. It's pieces of the puzzle we're able to put together. So that all goes towards the clearance rate as well. But as far as again, as far as the manning, I'm here to support the what's being asked for with the 107. I don't think that we're out of the norm. Again, whether we had more officers or less with what's being asked for with the clearance rate.
In that regard, I was here, and I think you were here, Leo, at the time, post 9/11, there was a ramp up of cameras being installed. In the very beginning, I think we did a tour of the station with the very first
bank
of cameras, and I think at the time, Massport helped support some of that grant.
It was a federal grant from UASI, yeah.
Because we had some with the bridges. So, and you say it's we have more today than obviously more cameras. I don't recall in our CIP if there was additional calls for more cameras this year. But is there? Are you satisfied right now with where we have current amount of cameras? And one of the things we used to ask, particularly zoning board, was the request that new buildings would put city cameras on. Where do you feel the coverage is right now?
So it's
without obviously diverging any weak spots that we have.
No, I mean, we don't, honestly, we don't, it's a great question. We don't have any covert cameras. Everything is pronounced for the public to see where they're at. The initial bank of cameras was 12. It was a federal grant, and it was critical infrastructure, as you indicated, with the bridges and so forth. Over the years, we've been lucky enough to be a partner with the Metro Boston Homeland Security region. We have funds that are allocated to the 8 communities that surround Boston and Boston. So we've been, for the most part, almost all of the cameras that we have in place were paid for with federal money. Every now and again, there's a city manager and/or city councils that have specific requests based on situations that are developing in their district where they think there's a blind spot, there's no coverage. And there's been times, and I don't know the exact number, but there's been times where we've utilized city funds. But when we have, the good news is that over the years, when we first instituted the camera program, the cameras were very expensive, like $15,000 a unit. The prices come way down. So we're able to, when we purchase a camera at a given location, for the most part, we're able to put 3 in there. So there'd be 1 pan-tilt zoom, 2 fixed on high priority locations, and the price is relatively reasonable. I think to the point where it might be about $3,000 per package. So there's times where there's money's available, or funds available from the city. If not, we go back to the well with UASI, with the Metro Boston Homeland Security region, each and every year. And the cameras that we have coming online, some additional 10 cameras they're working on right now, is all from federal grant.
So I just want to, we have in the past had a small amount of money in our CIP for cameras. It was one of the things that was cut in this revised CIP as something that we would prefer. So there is no money in this year's budget.
Councilors, any questions for the chief? Councilor Vidal.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hi, Chief Kais, how are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay. I have a couple of questions. Obviously, there's this mass mobilizations happening across the country, across the world, with respect to some of the systemic inequities that exist within different systems, the police department in particular. There's a lot of calls about defunding police. I know that you've been meeting with the Black and Latino legislation, and you've been meeting with leaders in other parts of the state to talk about some of the pending issues that are arising. I'm curious about what reflections you have as far as what would it mean to not necessarily defund the police, but to reimagine what public safety could look like in Chelsea. Now, with full respect, I understand that under your leadership, there isn't much of a tolerance for some of the things that we have seen in Chelsea in the past, and I praise you for that. But I'm just curious as to what your opinion is on that. I know I have received several letters from Brandon residents about us cutting the budget for the police department. I have for many years been very concerned about the amount of money that we spend on public safety in general. Curious about your reflection on that, and then I have another follow-up.
Well, no, I respect the point. I'm a little at times on the general movement of that particular phrase that you just mentioned, defund the police. I've had the opportunity to talk to different elected officials in terms of what their opinion is in terms of what that means. And when I've had the one-on-one conversations, I have yet to have one elected official say that we meant to defund the police if they were part of any movement. And there was some talk that I heard I don't know if it's a new catchphrase or a new word, reprogram. And I have asked, like, what does that mean? And again, I understand and I respect and appreciate what's happening or what has happened with some of the tragedies around the country. But at the end of the day, when we talk about the Commonwealth and certainly we talk about, our city of Chelsea, I just need to understand, and to your question about reimagining public safety in Chelsea, I just have the overall goal, and I'm open-minded if there's any ideas and suggestions of keeping everybody as safe and secure as possible. I know that, just again, that when I first started as chief, certainly over the years, I had a lot to learn, and I listened and I still listen. But at the same time, I realized that with my individual philosophy for the police department, we hear about the talk of community policing. And I remember talking with this council many times that I wanted to bring that philosophy to another level. I wanted to enhance community engagement and community outreach to another level. I know this was even when Deputy City Manager Keith was, I believe at the time, might have been 2015 or 14, when we had this conversation when I wanted to hire someone who was dedicated as a civilian to that premise, in addition to reinforcing what we have as a philosophy with all the men and women of the department. I preached that around the general area of other departments as well as beyond. And some people, some other officers or leaders would ask me why. And I say, I think it's important to get ahead of any problem now. I think it's important with our relationship building to build these relationships with our young folks. I think it's important in terms of your question to reimagine public safety. The best position I think that the police would be in would be if the phones weren't ringing, if everybody was happy, and the residents were safe and secure as possible. But realizing full well that what we do now, you guys know this because you've heard me say it again many times, is as far as enforcing the laws of our states, the laws of our state that we have, it's probably 10 to 15% of what we do. And the other 85% is just being involved in relationship building, in solving problems, and working with residents who have issues, and just doing this over and over and over again. I say it all the time that I can imagine, I think back when, 20, 25 years ago, when the police department was such a closed entity in Chelsea and elsewhere, where all we did is wear a uniform, got in a car, and answered the radio calls as they came in. And now we're all about not just partnering, but honestly facilitating and leading in discussions that are so non-law enforcement, but things that we want to be involved in, because the end result is keeping us safe. And if we can keep our young folks and our not so young folks kind of lined up to believe in our mission and work alongside of us, I think it's better for all of us. So to your point, and to anyone else that would have a similar question, I would always be open-minded and certainly, my door's open and I'll come to anyone's place to have a conversation. If there's a vision that's different than that, if there's a vision that's different, matter of fact, I was on the call just with the Attorney General a short time ago, and during her call, she mentioned, we're talking about a subject, I won't bore you with it, but one of the phrases she said was restoring trust. She said, Chief, I think it's important that we restore trust. And I didn't want to necessarily correct her, but I said, Attorney General, I said, I'm of the opinion, not so much to restore trust, but to enhance trust. I think in our city, and I can't speak for everyone, but I think in our city, we have a high level of trust, a high level of accountability, a high level of transparency, a high level of spirit of cooperation. I think to enhance that level to levels that are beyond what we have is my goal. So if part of your or anyone's vision is part of that, then I absolutely want to be a part of that conversation.
Okay, so I do have to say that under your leadership, there has been a lot of transparency. And I remember the police department of the past. And, you know, you and I have spoken at length about that. And so I know that you do have a zero tolerance, and I really do appreciate that. However, there is work. There are always blind spots. I mean, none of us are perfect, right? There's always room for improvement. And so I imagine, let me ask you a question. So we talk about, I know that we have the most diverse police force in the state. How many of those policemen of color that expand that number of diversity are in senior levels or in management positions?
So right now with what we have, one chief, 4 captains, all Caucasian. We have 9 lieutenants, 2 are Latino, 7 are Caucasian. We have 15 sergeants, of which 15 top of my head. We have 5 that are Latino, 5 that are Latino. And then as far as the breakdown for patrol officers, I'm not too sure, other than to know that we have 45% of our department is of a diverse classification. I shared with the city manager the other day that I had sent out, I think either last night or the night before, a couple of nights ago, I sent out a survey to all the major city departments and updated data on their diversity rate. I told the city manager that I feel with confidence that Chelsea will probably be number 1 at 45%. Springfield will probably be close behind, but the average diversity rate in the major city departments here in our Commonwealth is about 18%. So at 45%, we still have a ways to go, but we're well ahead of others. And I think, twofold on your question, or anyone's question might ask, how is it, Chief, that you're going to attract more candidates to reflect the community? And we're doing that now. We've been doing it for several years in terms of our again, I'm talking about engaging people and so forth, but our recruitment efforts have been great. We had 3 officers that started today, actually 3 Latino officers, all 3 Latino officers bilingual. The hope was that if we didn't hit this pandemic and we had 111, we had 4 slated to go to the academy, which were also Latino. And as far as the reflection of the hierarchy of the police department in terms of leadership, this question has been asked over the years as well. We are a civil service police department, which means for officers to get elevated in rank, they take an examination. It's a competitive exam. It's a process. They compete against one another. And at some point, I mean, honestly, if the police department was 50%, 60%, 70% of a diverse class, just by virtue of the math, that would reflect the hierarchy would be a similar reflection at some point. But again, 33 years has gone by quick. When I started, we had 1 African-American officer and 1 Latino officer, no one of rank, 0. Over the years, certainly we've grown, and I suspect we'll continue to grow, not just in diversity of line level personnel, but supervisors as well.
I also noticed that in your budget, I looked at the budgets for previous years, and the last 7 years, we spent $140,000 on ammunition. And I'm going to ask a silly question, but do bullets expire?
The bullets, I'm sorry,
expire. Why the need to spend so much money on ammunition, and what happens to the ammunition? Because I know there aren't any shootings. So where does that go?
Firing range. Yeah. So what happens is we have to. It's a great question. We have to qualify at the firing range once a year. What we do is we qualify twice a year. I would like to have the range 3 times a year. I want officers to be as proficient as possible with their weapons in the hope that they never have to use them. The new officers that go to the police academy, when they train for 7 days on the range, and they expend thousands and thousands of rounds of ammunition. I think I don't know the exact math, but it might be $8,000 worth of ammunition per officer. It's very expensive. So yeah, the reality is ammunition, no, it has a shelf life, probably a long time. If forever, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but the reality is we don't have like an armory of ammunition that we keep stockpiling. The ammunition is used for training for the newer officers, as well as the officers that are on the job as well with the in-service training.
One final question, Chief. If, let's say, this council came to an agreement that we wanted to cut 10% of your budget, which I believe the budget is about 12 million. I don't have it in front of me. Let's say that we wanted to cut 10% of your budget. Where do you see is the area for opportunity to make some adjustments?
Well, I forget I don't know what the percentage is already with the 4 offices. I don't know what does that equate to?
It's, 0.1%.
That's it, with 4 offices lost?
0.15 with the regular salary drops, yeah, that's.
Okay. It's certainly a, difficult question for me to answer. City manager's a lot smarter than I am, as is the city auditor, so that's, but at the end of the day, I guess if.
I don't know, you guys are both attorneys, I don't know.
At the end of the day, if we needed, I would not want to sacrifice any of the sworn positions or the civilian positions. For a department size, the size of Chelsea, we have a relatively small civilian staff. Usually you see a police department with 100 sworn officers, they probably have about 25 civilians, if not more. We have less than 10. If there was, just to answer the question, I guess anecdotally, I hope it doesn't happen, but we have other, as far as our overtime budget, our court time budget, what we do is as you guys know, over the past several years, we make a valiant effort never to have to come back to the city council and ask for additional funds. We have a budget, we stay within the budget. This year, I made a valiant effort based on the pandemic to save money. We're saving money with the court budget. Officers weren't going to court. Whatever we could and did not need to spend, I wanted to turn back to the city to reprogram where they saw fit. So I would just hope that I could potentially be entrusted with the budget that we're requesting to stay within those numbers, to not come back and look for additional funds, knowing full well that in the event that we did not need to spend money on a given project assignment, what have you, and there was money left at the end of coming into June of next year, then that money would be returned. That's always been my goal.
Okay, and then lastly, there's a push for student resource officers that are stationed at the school department to be removed from the schools. It's something they're talking about across the country. I spoke with the superintendent, and the value of that is about $138,000. If that is cut from the school department, what does that mean for those police officers?
Well, so I think number one, I think that would be a serious mistake. The dollar amount is 138, as you indicated. The value that they bring to the young folks in our community and the lasting difference in their lives. If that number was 200, if that number was 250, if that number was 300, I'd say it's still worth it. You may or may not know, in the Criminal Justice Reform Act that was adopted back on April 13th of 2018, there was a significant amount of effort and energy put into our young folks. And there was the significant law changes as it pertains to the SROs and what they're responsible for. We in Chelsea never looked upon our SROs as disciplinarians in the school. We looked at them as mentors for our young folks. We have officers, as a matter of fact, I had been talking with the former school superintendent, and she asked me the question, how many of our officers were once students of Chelsea High School over the past 20 years since we've had the SRO program? And I gave her a number of at least 40. And these are officers these are individuals who the officers at the time in the schools made a difference, a positive difference in their lives. The officers, I have a laundry list of things that they do. It is incredible as far as they're teaching the great program, the PAL program, what they do with the summer youth employment program, and we have what we call the Youth Police Academy, which other departments have for a week or two. In Chelsea, for the last 2 years, it's been 6 weeks. We have kids that have come into this program, some of the kids under challenging circumstances, not knowing what they want to do perhaps with their lives, they're young kids, and they come out of these programs and they know full well they want to be a police officer. I was part of one program known as YPI, National Program of Youth Police Initiative. 4 departments, Chelsea, Woburn, Brookline, and we had Everett. In the 4 departments went one-on-one, 12 officers with 12 young kids. And there was one young kid had some difficulties. He was asked to describe police the first day in his words, what he thought of police. And there was an expletive, and then the second word was pig. And I thought, wow, this is going to be a challenge with this young man. At the end of it, when we had the graduation at Chelsea High School, and I saw him that he was elected by his peers as the guest speaker, he was 13 years old. the most articulate kid I ever heard in my life. He was 13 years old, talking like he was 23. Seemed like he was college educated, 13 years old from the middle school. And when he gave his speech and he talked and his parents were proud and he turned to walk away, and I was like feeling goosebumps, and I had the chief of moving stick his elbow in my ribs saying, wow. And then he stopped, he turned around to come back and said, can I say one more thing? And, you know, the mic was his. And he grabbed the mic with two hands. He was kind of trembling a bit. And he turned around and he said, I know now, I was misguided, I was misdirected. I know now what I want to do with my life. I want to finish school. I want to go to college. He turned around and looked at the young men and women who were the police officers from the 4 departments. He said, I want to be like them. I want to be a police officer. That was a 2-week program, and that's all it was. And I got goosebumps, and I had water coming down the left side of my face, and I was, you know, embarrassed, but, you know, I'm human like everybody else, and it really touched me. And so when I think of SROs and I think of people, the influence they can have on our young people, and in the long run, the impact that they can have in a city like Chelsea, again, if it was not 138, if it was 238 or 338, I'd still have the same argument that I think nothing is more important than our SROs in Chelsea.
I hear what you're saying, but of course, that's just one perspective. As you know, I do a lot of youth work in the city. I have relationships with a lot of parents, teachers, admin, and a lot of times what I'm hearing from the community is that it just, how do you justify having a police officer to kind of police students when we don't have the support that we need for young people as far as mental health services and all the trauma that a lot of our kids are dealing with? I would think personally it would make more sense to have an additional social worker or guidance counselor in the schools. I've worked with some of the student resource officers that have come out of Chelsea. They have helped me with some of my basketball league, and they don't really build relationships with some of the older kids. And maybe it's because once they get a little older, they're kind of going through that phase. I don't know. But I just know that while the program may work for the middle schools, it doesn't seem for me to be very productive in the high school, as from what I'm hearing, from what I'm witnessing in my experience and what parents are saying. So again, I'm curious, if that is cut from the schools, what does that mean for those 2 police officers?
They would, if it was cut, number one, again, it would be a huge mistake. Number two, they would be incorporated into our deployment plan of our personnel and patrol.
Okay.
And I would just,
there would be a financial impact. And so if that money wasn't coming to the city from the school department, we have a couple of choices, none of which are great. One would be that we would reduce our support for the school department by an equivalent amount.
Yep.
You overfund the school department by almost $5 million. One thing we get back is they pay us $138,000. One option you'd have is to reduce your support for them by $138,000. The second choice is we just cover the cost and increase our reserve appropriation by $138,000. The third and worst is that you reduce the contingent of the police force by 2. But you would not be laying off those 2 officers. You'd be laying off the 2 most recent persons who got sworn in today.
So basically what you're saying is that even though we asked the superintendent, if we cut that from the budget, where would she apply it? And she says, nowhere, because we need the student resource officers. And even though we know that it is systems like this that actually perpetuate the school to prison pipeline, as long as we're underfunding our schools, we're still going to continue to fund these positions, even though parents and teachers and students are saying that it might not work?
No, I'm saying that if the school department decided we're not paying for these 2 officers, we would bring them back and out of the school department. If that was a school committee's choice, we don't want school resource officers, we would bring them back to our department. But we would have to find money for them somewhere. And the only 3 ways to find money for them would be, we, 1, reduce what we're giving to the schools. 2, we increase our reserves. Or 3, we cut the police department budget by the value of these 2 officers.
I just can't understand if we're saying that violent crime is down, we're not in the top 100, homicide is down. I just don't understand why we don't have an organizational structure that is based on the need that we actually have in the community. I guess that's where I am. I feel like, it's great. That's a testament to the work that we've been able to do in the police department. We're doing a lot better, crime is down. But then why so many police officers? And if there isn't a need for student resource officers in the school, why would we continue to fund these positions that may not serve a need?
I think a contingent of 100% is a right contingent in the city. I'd also say, if you would just give me 1 minute to you asked the question at the very beginning about the chief. And I was thinking about the idea of reimagining what police forces look like. But honestly, I feel like this department has been reimagining police force, at least for the time that I've been here. I mean, I can't tell you how many meetings I sit in, whether they're hub meetings, downtown task force meetings, or just meetings with the chief and some of his patrol officers. And we're talking about how are we helping this person who's creating some problems out there. And it's never, the answer is never, we're going to arrest him. The answer is usually, we're sitting with social service providers around the table, whether it's not Suffolk, or it's Catholic, or it's some other entity, it's the best team. And we're saying, all right, what if this team finds this support? What if Catholic can find some housing for this person? And it's never, the answer is never, let's take some criminal justice approach to this. It's always, is there some way we can wrap around this person and give him or her the help they need? I think that's reimagining the way you provide public safety in a community. And this community has been doing it for at least the time that I've been here.
Tom, I wanted to, Councilor Vidal had brought the question about reimagining or repurposing funding to the police department, but some of the ideas that have been proposed that I've been hearing about repurposing funding for the police department into social services reminded me of what you had said, that the city seems to already have some of that going on. You have a civilian on your payroll, Dan Cortez, who is a part of the hub group. But can you give us the value that you have in the budget? And I don't think it's part of the police budget, but outside, on the navigators and the money that goes with North Suffolk and hub work that, again, tries to work on crime in a non-court way. So how much money, not in the police budget, is spent for those contracts that we have?
That's an exchange, yes. That could have been in here. We made a decision, we would fund it in an HHS administrative line item, but those contracts, which I consider to be the navigators contract, contracts with Captain, those amount to at least $400,000 annually. But in addition to that, we put a lot of grant money towards these programs too. So we have grant money that we use for CAPIC to oversee and help manage, along with public safety, the resource center that Father Ricardo runs on Broadway. We get money. We have grant money from the ROC, the Winnesota Region Opioid Collaborative, that helps to pay for the CAPIC van that's out there, providing mobile support. So as a city, we not only appropriate money, but we go out of our way to try to find grant money that we can buttress some of these programs. We put a lot of resources into the kind of social service support, but the police are really a big part of that social service support. As I say, when we're around the table talking about how do we help Mr. X or Ms. Y, the police are a part of that conversation all the time. But as I said, it's never about how can we engage the criminal justice system. It's usually, how do we get these people, make sure they don't end up in the criminal justice system? We don't want to arrest them, but we also don't want them going into repair and getting arrested, and to ever get arrested. So how do we wrap around them and make sure that they get the services that they need? And at least in my tenure here, the police have been a big part of those discussions about solving problems in a non-criminal justice way.
So, and I think that's part of what has made a difference
and what is part of the cleanup in the downtown Broadway. But to Council Vidal's point, and I don't want this to be lost, what we've done for those who have an addiction problem, repeat, also those who were, there was a program for prostitution, also trying to get them off the street so that they're not using drugs via the sex trade, that there's not this connection or seem of focus, at least in the high school level. So is there, and again, I don't know if it's ROCA is the go-to agency that deals with that age bracket, but is there any thoughts as to how to engage and do something similar to someone who's on that path at that level? Is there thoughts of what could be done there, if anything?
Sure. I mean, well, it's not just the, we used to have 4 SROs when we started the relationship and the partnership back in the early 90s. And, when we had to scale back over time, that hurt. But honestly, I can talk about this all night if you want, but I think I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I think at some point you're going to talk to the school department. And if what Councilor Vidal is stating that parents don't want the SROs in the schools, which I think is false. If teachers don't want the SROs in the schools, which I think is false. If the administrators don't want them there, then if that's the outcry, and then, I'd be, I'm reasonable, I understand that, and I'd sit with the manager and we'd have that discussion. I'm hearing quite the opposite. I'm hearing officers that volunteer their time to coach the baseball team when they needed a coach. I'm hearing officers that volunteer their time to take kids down the weight room that want to, build up muscle and so forth. I'm hearing kids that need connections for jobs. These officers who know people, bring them out in the community and try to help them get jobs. And I could go on and on and on, not to mention probably one of the biggest ones, that the climate that we live in right now with the threat of an active shooter, where we're averaging, it's a class that I teach and I can bore you with the statistics, how alarming it is. And the fact that we have our SROs and other officers training our young people on the ASHA, the run, hide, fight, and how to be prepared and how to intervene and how to kind of notice individuals that might be going astray and bringing forward with information so that we can intervene, God forbid, before something happens. But to actually have turn an above face to that and just retreat and have officers out of the school, I think is a huge, huge mistake.
But the question is, if it's not about taking an SRO out of the high school, what this is about is a question of, I think Vidal is saying maybe there's a segment in the high school that isn't making that connection with the SRO, less likely than middle school. And similar to what we do at Hub, what, if anything, can be done in that age bracket?
So we have many of the, talking about the Hub, we have many students that are, many what we call situations that are high school students. We have kids that are, they're truant. We have kids that are gang involved. We have our SROs and other officers and detectives that form relationships with these kids, form relationships with their parent or their parents or their guardians to prevent them from going astray. So, and ROCA is a huge partner with that, as other groups did help us in the lives of these young people. So again, they don't go down that wrong path. And we try to just, the idea right now is that, the kind of the term of the day over the last several years is just to flood them with services, flood them with what they need in order to succeed. And like Tom said, it's never mentioned in the equation at all about arresting them, unless of course there's a serious crime that we have to, we have to do as far as introducing them into the criminal justice system. But beyond that, it's about helping them. And again, the SROs, they're a wealth of knowledge for intelligence, where kids are actually going down the wrong path. And when the kids are in the middle school, yeah, it does start early, no question. When they get to the high school and they're 14 to 18, and some of our high school students are not 18, they're not 19, they're not 20, they're 21. So, having that presence there is important. And I always say this, I've bragged about this for a long time. I think ROCA is excellent. I think the collaborative is excellent. The Boys and Girls Club is excellent. Probably the strongest partner we've had over several years has been the school department. The partnership and relationship we have with the school department is second to none. And again, like I say, excuse me, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, but when the school department comes up before this council, I would ask the same questions. And if the school superintendent and others feel as though that it's counterproductive at this point, then I respect that, and I'll be open-minded, and you know, we'd have to do what we have to do. But that being said, I'd be shocked if that was the case.
Question.
Counselor Recupero.
Thank you, Chief, for not going over the overtime. You're one of the few departments that didn't go over overtime. You kept with it all the years that I've been here. I've never seen your department really go over overtime. There's a few questions I want to ask you. One is, do you intend to put police officers back on the bicycles to patrol the areas in the neighborhoods?
Yes.
And blocking details?
Yes.
Yeah. Then that's a great thing. The next thing I have is something here that I don't understand. Maybe Mr. Dunn can explain it because it's more of his expertise. What is leased property? What do you lease?
There's a parking lot that's.
The one that belongs to the school?
No, it's privately owned.
Well, across the street from
Williams.
that's the one?
Yeah,
William Street.
Okay.
And like Condo or what?
I didn't get what that was.
And we still lease the little office space, across the street on Washington Ave, correct?
I'm not sure.
Dog officer place, is that?
Oh, there's no, yeah, it's no.
So that line in particular is the parking lot lease.
So that's that one, right? There's another one here that I don't seem to understand. Well, I don't know. Did you get another dog?
We have 2 dogs. I'm sorry, we have 1 dog. We had 3, we went down to 2, we have 1. And
I only have one?
1, and there was no cost for any of the canines. That was a federal grant. But we have 1 right now.
Okay. You did good, your gas is down, everything is down. I don't have much to say about, you say you're gonna make the officers go back on the bicycle patrol in the area, the crime is down, so how much more can we say about you? Your department is doing what is, you know what I mean? It's keeping it down, and you're gonna go back and go to the neighborhoods, so you ought to be commended on doing that. So I don't have any more questions, that's all I wanted to know was that. Oh, one more thing, how come the security cameras is minus? Are we lowering the security cameras?
No, that was a CIP approved in FY20, so that minus is comparing FY20's adopted to 21, so that's not in 21 when it was in 20. It was the CIP project in 20. So we're not subtracting it, we're just not.
Yeah, I'm saying that when it's subtracted from it, so we're not putting anything else up?
Well, there's no project for it. We talked about that a little while ago.
A little earlier, I asked about if we're increasing cameras, and they said that they are not buying new cameras this year. So they're not in addition.
It's extended a year, I'm not exactly sure what the plan is, but it's not in the CIP of business.
It's not in the immediate future to put more cameras.
So what we'll do is we'll continue to ask via the federal grant for additional cameras. If we have 200 at some point, we make sure that every intersection along Broadway has a camera. It'll be the other Main Street, Washington Avenue, we'd like to do the same. Going up through Prattville, right now, there are some blind spots, so we'll continue to, that's kind of one of the main requests we have each and every year from the federal government, is for the cameras.
I asked that, one question, this is the last question. Somebody called me up, right, and asked me a question, I don't know if it's true. They said when they request a video from you, they gotta pay $35.
I don't know that to be the case. There might be a fee. I don't, if it's the fee, it's by statute. But honestly, $35 doesn't come to mind. That seems kind of high. I'm just not sure.
Yes, the person said to me they requested a video, because they some kind of an accident, and they want to request a video, they send an insurance company.
Sure.
And they said to me, why do I have to pay $35 to request a video?
The way it works, and again, I'll double check, I'll give you the exact number. The way it works is if there's a public records request for a report, in this case, a piece of video, then the time that it takes for the least paid employee, and it's $35 an hour for someone, a civilian employee, to perform that function, like an hour's worth of work to pinpoint the video at the time. I'll be honest with you. I know one thing that it takes, sometimes based on the request, far more than 1 hour to get a piece of video. So the request could take 3 or 4 hours, but if we do charge it all, the bottom number would be the hourly rate of the employee. The employee makes the less, it'd be $35 an hour.
So then that was a 9 for me.
I just don't know what the number is. I know one thing is there's a lot of, in terms of public records requests, there's a lot of information that based on some individuals will send a letter, get the letter, and they have limited means, and they request that we waive the fee, and we always do. We waive the fee for the most part.
You waive the fee sometimes?
For the most part, we do.
Thank you. I don't know what questions.
I got a question.
Councilor Robinson.
Just to get back to the school offices, because I've had the opportunity to be in the school quite a bit. I know like Lieutenant Delaney and Tyree participated on the policy committee for the REACH program.
Yes.
And that I think people don't really understand what the school officers are really about. They are building a lot of relationships with the kids. You know what's going on, I think, because it's not fully publicized as to what they're actually doing. I think there's a misconception of what they're really doing.
Yeah, and to that point, I'm glad you brought that up, because you might ask the question, and I'm surprised someone didn't ask the question, that the school resource officers in the schools, and if they are police officers and they are policing the schools, they must be making arrests. And we look at the number of arrests that the current SROs made this year, the answer is 0. The current arrests that they made last year, the answer is 0. The number of arrests they made the year before was 2. One officer, who's now a detective, Keith Sweeney, had occasion, there was 2 individuals involved in a violent assault with a weapon. But beyond that, when I heard, like across the state, with the Criminal Justice Reform Act, that they decriminalized disturbing the school assembly, disorderly conduct, and disturbing the peace in the school. One of the questions I had is like, why are we doing this as a state? Why is it necessary? And they made the point that the data shows that some school resource officers in some locations were making a considerable amount of arrests for disturbing the school assembly. So what I did when that came up, I don't know if it was true or false based on the statewide data, but I looked at Chelsea and I went back over 5 years, and the number of arrests for disturbing the school assembly and the other 2 charges was 0. It's something that I always say that the cops here, the men and women in Chelsea, I give them a incredible credit for their communication skills, their ability, when something is out of control, to kind of de-escalate the situation and bring it down. And I think they do a fabulous job at that, and it's evident by, again, the numbers. If I was here today, and again, I was asked that question, I said, well, last year we had 19 arrests in the school. To me, that would seem very high. But to say 0, I think is just reinforces what they do in their communication skills. And again, by statute and just by philosophy and by policy, they are not school disciplinarians. It's not their role.
Councilor Lopez.
Chief, overtime. How frequently is overtime being used? And when an officer is being called for overtime, what are they doing? Is patrol the city, doing paperwork, or they are called for emergency?
So the vast majority of the overtime, the way it's distributed, probably 80% of it is what's called patrol overtime backfill. Meaning when we have officers that, based on their vacations that they take via their collective bargaining agreement, their contract, if officers are out sick or injured, or officers are just not reporting for whatever the reason is, they many times, based on minimum manning, based on contractual obligations, they need to be replaced. So if tonight we had 10 officers scheduled for work and 2 officers were on vacation, 1 officer was on a comp day and 1 officer was sick. Although overall, I gotta say that over the past 15 years, the sick time is really, really low. It's really low, and I've brought that up at other council meetings in the past. But the reality is we'd have to replace them with a backfill, and the same with supervisors. So probably, again, 80% of that, 75 to 80% of it is the backfill. The balance is investigations. It could be a gang investigation, a drug investigation, certain follow-up investigations that go beyond the normal workday. Some of it certainly, recently with COVID-19, we're spending a lot of overtime in assisting with some of the food distribution sites at the request of many, in terms of providing security and so forth. We have large lines and all that, but that's primarily how it's broken down. Okay.
Any questions from any other councilors at home?
Nope, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Chief Kais,
Great.
thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it,
Thanks for
guys.
your work.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, the next department that's gonna be up is the fire department. On the main budget, you're looking at page 23. On the annotated city manager's, packet, it's page 10. And on the employee salary list, page 17.
I know it. You missed me, I'm sorry.
So page 23, main budget document is the fire department budget, page 23. Page 17 of the salary document, page 10 of the annotated. First, on the salaries, you'll notice that the salaries are up 416,000. This is one of the collective bargaining agreements that has the fiscal 21 increase. This is actually the only one that has fiscal 21 increase. So this reflects that. If you look at the overtime is down. The chief has done a pretty good job of controlling overtime in fiscal 20. There is no supplement for fire department overtime pending for Monday's orders. So I commend the chief on the work that he's done to try to control that, but that's been a problem in the past. The operations lines are pretty level funded except for a couple. The equipment maintenance is up slightly at $10,000. The UL apparatus testing on page 24 is down $10,000. Gasoline is down 10%, consistent with what we talked about with all the other departments. And there are some smaller increases related to vehicle supplies and firefighting supplies. Overall, this budget is up $286,000 or 2.55%. The force total is 111 with 30 officers, 68 firefighters, and 1 civilian position. There are 2 position reductions in this budget.
Yeah, so just the correction, I think you read the wrong number. So it's 100 firefighters.
Okay.
Down from a contingent of 102.
Okay.
So there are 2 vacancies, which prior to COVID, we were planning to fill, and which we are not filling right now. And there may be some retirements in this force during the course of FY21, and if there are, we will not fill those.
Yes, let me correct that, it's 101, not 101. Yes.
You want to make any statements on
No, that's the large increase in salaries. This is the one union workforce that actually has a raise kicking in next year. This is the final year of their contract. They had a 4-year contract, and this is the final year. It's a 2.5% raise that kicks in on July 1 of 2020.
Any questions for the chief? Yeah. I guess I'll ask a question, actually. One of the things that, I don't know how we can address it, but it always jumps out at me, the out of grade. Situation. I know when certain people are out and we bring in a lesser position, then we gotta pay them the same amount. Was lieutenant had to replace the captain out there.
Yeah, basically, the out of grade is, in some situations, vacancies are covered with overtime. In other situations, when there's extra staffing on that shift, members are moved up. So, you know, the more out of grade you spend is actually a good thing because it's less that you're spending on the overtime side. But it's basically and we are absorbing the 6 to 8 safer salaries. So we're absorbing 6 salaries and giving out a 2.5% pay raise, and the whole entire budget submission is only 2.5% higher. So we've already made about $300,000 of cuts in this budget. Trying to keep it very realistic. And this is my 4th going on 5th budget. We've budgeted very realistically with the help of the council and the city manager. And in that timeframe, we've never asked for a supplement. So not just this year, but we've never asked for a supplement since we've established a very realistic budget.
Okay, so what I was gonna add to that is that the fiscal 20 budget did not budget a complete year for the grant positions. I think it was the 3rd because it ended in September.
No, it ends this September. This budget includes federal funding for July and August only at only 35%. So we're absorbing 65% of July and August and 100% of September through the end of June.
Any questions out there?
No, I'm all set. I'm watching you guys on TV too, so back and forth.
You have any questions, Calvin?
Nope, not at all. I'm all set. I'm back on live, I guess.
Yeah, we can hear you. Any other questions for the meeting?
That's good.
We're good?
Oh, that was quick. Thank you, Chief.
That's what happens when you go last, right?
That's right.
Thank you, Chief. Must be the haircut.
Thank you.
All right, John. Another year down?
That's it?
Yeah, so
That's it.
we'll get the orders to you whenever, I'm not sure when you're having your
29.
meeting.
29, yeah, come on, you should know that.
Okay.
Be on the 29.